let's call it back. So I will ask our city manager to give us a brief introduction to the next segment of the City of Grande Prairie's 2020 budget discussions. City Manager Galante.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following similar process and philosophy CLT did for the green, yellow, and red packages, similar vetting process, we mimic that to prepare a package of additions to staff complement for the organization. So we received many different requests from departments. Of course, there are many needs and demands in the organization. However, following that vetting process, CLT is recommending, I believe it's 8 positions to be added to the organization in key different areas where we consider this package the minimum product to really run the organization efficiently and in areas where there is a need. As you're aware, there is a net reduction in headcount on positions. It's in your packages. So these 8 are key positions, as I said, needed in the organization to run it in an efficient way.
Okay, thanks very much for that introduction. And so I did see a slide earlier on in the day about those positions, and I guess we would follow the similar sort of structure of going through the director of the service area that's listed first to give council a bit of instruction or details, a background on what the position is. And we'll follow sort of the opposite process that we did with the deletions, where we would have a council motion to affirm council's approval of the administration recommendation on the positions. Okay. And I think our first up is Corporate Services and Director Walker.
Thank you, Mayor Given. So the first one is a project estimator for the corporate facility management area. This position is, pardon me for just a second, and I'll open my description. This position completes, let me back up for a second. Corporate facility management embarked on a restructuring proposal to align their department with best practice in the industry as far as what types of things a facility management group would address. They have 3 legs or 3 streams of service. This position completes the project management leg of corporate facilities management. So this position would support the 2 project managers that we have in place and help provide basically costing of the projects that come forward. So across the organization, department managers develop plans on what they would like to do, and they submit those proposals to corporate facilities management, and they identify what the cost is for that project. So essentially that's what this position would be mainly focused on. There were, just for reference, 8 capital projects, large capital projects in the 2019 capital plan, and approximately 80 facility renewal projects that this position would prepare the cost packages for.
Okay, thank you.
The next position is in ITS. It's an infrastructure and connectivity manager, and this position essentially is a replacement of an existing position. So it's not truly a new position in that there's an additional FTE associated with it. It replaces a position that is set to retire by the end of the year. And so we planned on transferring responsibilities for the help desk supervisor over to this position. And this position would be responsible for ensuring that the network environment is stable. The role is a dedicated stewardship planning operation for the data centers, the networks, and for security. and enterprise digital storage, the servers and core services. So this would be a position in the ITS department that would address all things infrastructure and connectivity, as well as it would have the help desk reporting to it. And the corporate asset manager is the next one. This position is a brand new position in the organization that would have responsibility for the enterprise asset management system. This is directly aligns with an objective in Council's strategic plan to improve the city's ability to do life cycle planning with, for our asset structure and to maintain and coordinate that software application. So this is that new position. Then finally, we have a finance budget officer. And this position essentially is will be a dedicated position to budget to keep up with the annual rolling budget model that we have in place now to ensure our priority-based budgeting software is in sync with our existing budgeting software. We would have one position overseeing that whole budget financial reporting type of area. So this actually completes a restructuring that we did in our finance department.
Okay, thanks very much for that introduction. So an opportunity for questions for the director for that service area. Any questions on those positions? Councillor Bressie?
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. Just to follow up to a little bit of what's happening, my understanding is that there's been over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of effort to centralize services in terms of services that were distributed across the organization, bringing into a central model where now instead of everybody doing their own little thing for areas, we're doing that centrally, delivering that to areas. It sounds like, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's aspects in these jobs that are helping with that centralization in terms of these might be roles that were already happening in the organization off sides of desks, and now they're being brought in one central location. Is that a fair characterization of some of what's happening here?
Dr. Walker?
Thank you, Mayor Given. Yes, that's precisely what it is we're trying to do. So we have tried to centralize operations in a number of areas. Corporate facilities management is one of those, ITS is another, and certainly finance is a third. And throughout corporate services, the whole service area, you will see that in every department, with the exception of taxation and assessment, because they're unique. We are providing those services in a more centralized fashion.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Then we'll go on to if there weren't any other questions for this director, we'll go on to the explanation of the other positions from the other directors, and then we'll move around to council going back through in terms of making motions to endorse adding those positions. So our next service area up was infrastructure and economic development. I see Director Glavin's ready at the mic.
Thank you, Mayor Given. So the position here is an economic development officer. This is specifically focused at industrial attraction. So they would be responsible for marketing the city with that primary focus. They would also develop, implement, and manage programs, policies, services, and other necessary tools for business investment attraction. They will also actively recruit and build relationships with prospective businesses, investors, as well as local industry, as from the expansion perspective. And they would do this a variety of ways, including going to industry events, conferences where decision makers and investors in this sphere operate. And the intent, one of the significant parts of this is to act as a liaison from the time of final investment decision all the way to the time that the business is up and operating. So it would be a little bit more hands-on with some of these larger projects that we're hoping to attract into the area.
Okay. Any questions for the director on this area? Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Can I just have, I mean, we've got a council budget for the different service areas, but can I just have a reminder of how many employees we currently have in economic development now?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. There are currently 3 employees in economic development. This would be the 4th.
Okay, and for this new position, do we have a cost of what this position would be?
Dr. Glavin.
Ballpark on that, I don't have it in front of me, but I think you would be all in with benefits in the realm of about 120,000.
Thanks, Councillor Platt. Dr. Glavin, just so you answered about how many people are currently in the Economic Development Department, can you give us a little bit more information of the breakdown of roles of those people?
Sure. So currently we have a manager of economic development. We have a economic development officer who focuses more so on retail commercial activities. Currently they're more general in nature until we hire the second economic development officer, as well as a business retention expansion coordinator.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else with any other questions for that area. Then next we would go to community services and Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So our position is a fleet supervisor. Fleet.
Today, that might be appropriate today.
Yeah.
Fleet supervisor, sure.
It's because of the rough time I had this morning. But anyways, it's a fleet supervisor. Currently, we have a manager, we have 1 supervisor, and then we have a admin person, we have a planner scheduler, and also a support systems position. We have, between our utility workers, the mechanics, the 2 welders, a couple of utility workers, already mentioned, it's 22 staff members. So we have 22 reporting to 1 supervisor. So we'd like to bring a second supervisor in and to lessen the workload on the 1. Even 11 to 1 is still a very high ratio, but so it's day-to-day supervision of the mechanics. Probably 6-8 months ago, what we did is we split it into 2 shifts. We have an early shift and then a later shift. And our plan there was to provide a better level of service to the different departments and start earlier and get on the equipment earlier and then work later into the day as well. So having a second supervisor in the operational aspect would be very helpful to us. So.
Okay, any questions for Director Miller? Don't see anybody ringing in with any questions. Then we'll go to our last area under the Chief of Staff. Mr. Wark.
Thank you, Mayor Given. And these 2 positions go directly to what Councillor Bressie said. And in our move to move from a decentralized model to bring some functions corporately, that these are to identify positions where we think we could use some more horsepower. Manager strategy position has been a working title for the last couple of years as we've looked at this. At this point, we would probably look at a different title if I cue that up now. But really the function is we need some more horsepower for CLT to task on things like corporate efficiency, project management, and process review. And that we believe we're missing a piece there. We're missing out on some opportunities without some more horsepower there. The engagement officer would join the communications team. They would be a part of that with a focus on enhancing our engagement efforts, which we've started this year as essentially side of desk projects as we've tried to scoop up things that were happening across the organization. So we see this as an enhanced service that aligns with council's strategic priorities.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Bork. Any questions for the Chief of Staff? And seeing none, then we'll move back to the start and I would look for business rising. In this instance, this is administration's recommendations on positions, the 8 positions that need to be added to support council strategic directions. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor Given. As we don't have that document in front of us, is it possible to leave it on the screen while we go through business rising? Thank you. If all right, I was waiting till the end for questions. If I could ask Director Walker a question.
I think we've gone through the cycle of them, so if there's sort of an overarching question or sure. Other, yeah.
Director Walker, could you tell me a little bit more about the project estimator position?
Director Walker.
Sure. Let me just pull up my email from the corporate facilities manager, and I'll read you the whole thing. So the project supervisor and estimator position will fill a significant gap in the project management division of CFM. Currently, the project management division focuses primarily on capital projects for 2019. And secondly, renewal projects, there were 80 in 2019, which are managed by 2 FTEs. This necessary position will be comprised of 2 roles, project supervision and project estimation. The required position will allow the CFM department, and more importantly, the organization as a whole, to reduce the number of deferred projects due to lack of resources. Historically, the annual renewal budget has shown consistent year-end surplus amounts, which subsequently increases the growing list of projects requiring completion. This trend will only continue to diminish the condition of the affected facilities and assets, and only the highest prioritized items for safety and legislation will be addressed. So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Palat.
Thanks again, Mayor Gibbon. Just back to the economic development position. I'm just curious. Am I safe to assume that the 809,000 proposed in our package includes this position already?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I believe it was in last year's budget, and it is included in your $809,000.
Okay. So I'm struggling with this position, and I just kind of want to let council know why. You know, with the proposed budget, we'd be spending $809,000 in economic development. We approved $25,000 in corporate sponsorships. We have $250,000 in downtown and other incentives. We're supporting the tri-municipal industrial initiatives. We've got a chamber debate probably coming on how much we're supporting them already with the facility. We're doing gifts in kinds. We're doing community group funding. We're doing large-scale tourism. We're spending about $1.5 million a year in economic development. I asked Director Walker before budget how much we thought we were going to have for 2019 for growth, and it was $1.56 million. And I have to say, I'm starting to wonder, are we getting a good enough value of what we're spending on economic development? I'm not knocking economic development, but there gets to be a point in your marketing cycle where you have to wonder if you're spending more than what you're creating. And so in 2018, we created 1.85 million. And so I'm concerned that we maybe need to, my gut is we need to look at maybe reallocating how we're spending, and not maybe just keep spending more on economic development, and realizing that economic development doesn't just end with that line item. There's all the other things that the city's doing outside of economic development that create economic development. So I'm not in support of hiring this position at this time, and it breaks my heart because I always want to promote economic development, but I just think we're spending a lot of money in economic development already, and I don't know if I can support this position. So I'm open to some conversation, but I probably will be entertaining a motion.
So just in terms of process at this stage, this was an opportunity for council to endorse management's recommendations of additions to the organization. It's sort of the exact opposite of the ones before, where we need a council motion to act on, but still we still need a council motion to act on these. We can have discussion and debate on each of them. And my recommendation would be that we do that. But the motion in this instance is not to delete them. It should be to add these positions. So council did the hard work of being the bad guy, to be really frank, of being the bad guys of cutting a bunch of stuff and making those decisions. There are also political decisions of what things we want to support from management's recommendations of stuff that we should add. And I'll do this on behalf of administration, sort of as my role of the go-between. Council isn't seeing the green, red, and yellow levels of recommendation here. I would be willing to bet that administration already did that sorting, and we are seeing only the greenest of the green here. I'll ask the city manager if you know how many positions did administration see that are not, position requests did administration see that are not in front of council today?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we initiated our vetting process for staffing requests and reviews, we started probably with a list of 40 to 50 different asks from the departments. We go through a very strict vetting process. Each department head soliciting a new position has to present a business plan, a mini business plan with specific questions about why the position is needed, what is the impact in the organization, what is the cost, what is the benefits, the impact on the community, the long-term sustainability of the position. So we go through a very strict vetting process that started between, I would say with 40 positions, ended up in this 8 recommended. Thank you.
Councillor, so that's all to say that Council, we should give administration the respect of having specific actions on their positions, and if we don't support them, then we need to vote against adding them, essentially, and we would need to speak to the reasons why, but we do need motions, I think, to follow administration's recommendation of adding a position, and then we vote against it and discuss and debate and vote the way that our conscience guides us. So I have a queue. Councillor Plot, you're at the top of that again. Are you ready again, or? Okay, Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. Can I? Thank you. So I would like to move that council support the addition of, I'm going to say, the 4 positions in corporate services. So project estimator, infrastructure and connectivity, corporate asset manager, and finance budget officer.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. Similar to our process with the deletions, we can have a package of them. And if council members wish to vote on any of the items independently, then we can ask to have it split out, and we'll vote on that item separate from the package. Councillor Clayton.
I would ask that these positions be split individually.
So all 4 of them individually?
Yes. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll vote on them all individually. They're all under Councillor Friesen's motion. And so we'll just discuss and debate them starting from the top, starting with the project estimator. Open for discussion and debate on the project estimator position. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. It's a statement that I'll probably just say for this one, but I think it applies to most, not necessarily all these positions, but most of these positions. And these are very under the hood positions where these are things that management is doing to do things that we've asked them to go and do. And we won't necessarily see these positions, but we'll see the fruits of the work. And I think we've set very high expectations for our management over this council term. And I'm incredibly proud of the work they've done to meet those expectations. And if they're saying that they need these to meet those expectations, then I tend to trust that. I'd point out that today we had a few conversations where when we were looking to cut things out of the budget, somebody said, whoa, that might be too big of a cut. We don't know if that can manage. And the brunt of the conversation was management said they can handle the cut and still deliver what we're telling them to deliver. We need to trust management to do that. Well, I'd say it goes the other way too. If management is saying that they need, there's a few exceptions that I think are more public facing, but I think for almost all these positions, they're very under the hood ones. This project estimator certainly is a very under the hood one. And I think if management is saying that they need it, then I think we should trust management and support this position.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate? We're discussing just the project estimator position, and the vote is for council support for adding the position. Any other discussion or debate? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. And that motion carries. Then we'll move on next to the infrastructure and connectivity manager position. That motion, again, by Councillor Friesen. Any discussion or debate on that recommendation? Again, I don't see anybody ringing in. Then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And now to the corporate asset manager position. Any discussion or debate on that position? Again, seeing nobody ring in, then I'll call for the vote. Thank you. That motion carries. And finally, the finance budget officer position. Any discussion or debate on that position? I don't see anybody ring in, so I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries as well. That'll take us next to the infrastructure and economic development line. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I feel like I've been incredibly supportive to administration in this because I want to be incredibly supportive to administration and the work that they've done. This one I'm having a hard time with, though, and again, for the reasons I've stated, we're basically spending dollar in, dollar out for growth. And I think we need to be a little bit more cognizant about what we're spending on, what we're getting return on. If you owned a business and you spent a bunch of money on marketing and you stopped and your sales didn't change, would you just continue to spending money on marketing? I'm fine with bodies. Maybe what I'm struggling with is the overall budget amount of what economic development has grown into on this. If we're saying 4 bodies, and that's, we're saying almost half this budget is other. And maybe that's the thing I'm struggling with is for somebody that's been to a lot of economic development events and has concentrated a lot of his first 2 years on this term around economic development, I just feel like maybe we're spending a little bit too money on trying to land the whale and spending a lot of money on conferences and other events and not going after the organic growth. And although this position would address the organic growth, I don't like the amount of capital we're going to spend on just economic development. And so for that reason, I'm going to make a motion that we don't support this position. Again, it breaks my heart because I think I like the thought of this position. I just don't want to see this budget creep up to where we're spending over $800,000 plus all the other things we're doing, which we may not consider economic development related, but they are economic development related. If we didn't sponsor corporate events, if we didn't sponsor downtown incentives, if we didn't sponsor the Tri-Municipal Industrial Partnership, if we didn't sponsor the Chamber and their events, if we didn't sponsor all the gifts and kinds of large-scale tourism funding, those are all economic development activities. And so overall for me, when we're spending $1.5 million to achieve $1.5 million, I just don't think that's good value for our community. So I can't support it.
Okay. So a motion would be to not approve the economic development officer position. Any discussion or debate on Councillor Palat's motion? Any discussion or debate? Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. I appreciate Councillor Platt's sentiments, and he builds a good case. But I think administration has built up a good case here, and the writing's on the wall. Our industrial attraction strategy is falling, and we're falling behind our neighbors all that are circling around us. We need to put resources in order to attract the things that make money for our tax base, that increase our revenue, and that's by finding and resourcing a position that will go out and find us industrial businesses to fill up our industrial park that we have growing up, hopefully out in Hughes Lake, and otherwise. I think this position is specific to that, and I think the more we resource it, the better our outcomes will be, and the better our bottom line will be in the end, and we won't be spending $1.5 million in and $1.5 million out for the same ends.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Platt, I've got you in the queue there, and some others. So yeah, I'll make sure to come back to you to close. Councillor Clayton.
A question for Director Glavin. In the 4, does that I think you told me at some point or told us that real estate, the position that manages our real estate, has moved out of economic development, so that doesn't include it in the 4. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our land officer position, which was formerly housed in this department, was shifted to planning and development.
I can, based on that answer, have a comment. I'll support the motion. If you recall, last year I was pretty vocal about supporting economic development. I've definitely been somebody to wave the flag for the great work that they do, and if you're not at the table, you don't get to be part of the conversation. And I feel that this department is doing a good job of being at the table. I just don't think there's a need to add an additional body at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Director Glavin, can you give me a bit of a differentiation between, so I think I understood you to say that there is currently one economic development officer, and this would essentially be adding an additional, and that they would have a specialization, essentially? Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. In the current structure, the EDO position is fairly generalist. The intent would be to specialize the two, having one focus on being proactive on industrial and one being proactive on commercial retail.
Okay. So one with a, so the desire or intention is to have a specific focus and a specific body of knowledge in one individual, rather than having one individual have to cover all the different areas.
That's correct.
So with that information, I guess I will speak against the motion. My observation first off is just about the level of importance we should provide, give the weight that we should give management's recommendation. They came forward to us with a significant amount of reductions, which means that it's very clear that they heard council's desire around taxes and about the size of the organization. These additions are the result of that same careful analysis and obvious understanding of where council wants to go. I believe that this restructuring of the department to allow for that increased focus and specialization is a result of a strategic review that management has likely undertaken to say, how can, council said we want to do a good job of economic development. What do we need to do that? And I think since our last budget time, management's had a conversation about that, and that's why we're seeing this. I think municipal economic development is a long game. And it is one where you, really, to be frank, either you believe in it or you don't. And if we're going to at all be in economic development, then you have to be there for that long time period, and the goal to develop relationships and put in place the right conditions for things to happen. And it's a bit different, I think, from the private sector, where you see the direct impact of that in terms of, I'm not sure that we'll ever sell out the city, in terms of all the space within the city, because it may be creating the opportunity for growth within existing businesses or other areas. But I just would recommend that council really take heed of management's recommendation and about the strategic nature and benefit of that focused scope of and differentiation, specialization of the positions. I certainly support that approach. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. This is a tough one for me, but I think I'm gonna be voting against this motion because I want there to be funding for this. And speak why I think it's important to fund this is, one, I'm looking at our recently approved economic development strategy, and a major plank in it is service major investments in the oil and gas sector. And I don't know how we have the resources to do that right now. And I think that this is an important role to help deliver on that strategy that we recently approved. I also think that I'm torn on effectiveness of roles like this, and how much do they return for themselves? But I think there's a significant risk that council's got ahead of it in the next few years, and that is we've got recently annexed land that we're targeting for industrial attraction, and part of our strategy for that could be providing some very expensive infrastructure investments in those areas in hopes of attracting industry. And right now, I struggle to know if we've got the expertise and the experience and the conversations with industry to know which of those investments would be wise and which wouldn't. And that's competency I really want us to have, and an experience I really want us to have in the next couple of years. So I think it's important to have this position right now. It seems to me, I'm still kind of on the fence of this, but I'm leaning towards we should have this position.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Plott, you want to be in on the discussion debate?
No, just to close.
Okay. Councillor Clayton. So you don't need to ring in. I'll remember you. I'll remember where the motion came from. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I can understand your concern, Councillor Bressie, but I guess here's my concern. Because we may or may not have a need for an added component of what the overall economic development is, doesn't mean that we need to go add a body. If we have a sector that we're really trying to get to, incentivize or entice to come to the city, and we don't necessarily have that person in position, we can get a consultant. We can work with industry to find these people. There's realtors out there that specialize in commercial. There's commercial stores closing all over the board right now. So to get new commercial retailers into our market is going to be a really tough job. And in my opinion, there's no one better to work with than someone who is solely focusing on that because they're getting paid by that transaction. Our economic development department is doing a great job. And if they feel that they're not specialized in certain industrial or commercial projects, then they can go consult with somebody or work with somebody, but we don't need another body just for that. There's going to be a reduction of new box stores, new retail come into the community because they're closing every day across North America. It's just the reality of retail right now. And so I think that to add another body just because we feel that we may not have a grasp over a certain sector isn't necessary. We can use other resources to fill that void. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Sir. Just a question for administration. I know there's been lots of talk about a canola to key process. Do we have any idea when that's going to be launched and what are hopeful outcomes of what that process is going to bring?
Look to the city manager on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe on November 26 is a stakeholder consultation first session. So an invitation has been sent to industry, shallow utility companies, for that meeting is to solicit initial feedback to present the platform as well to industry and the major players into this continuum from raw land to buildings. The plan is during 2020 to complete the engagement. The platform is built already. Now we need to refine the processes and make them more efficient, more streamlined. So the status quo, the current situation is built into the system, into the platform. We'll request input and then analyze the processes for final completion during 2020.
So I guess my hope with that, and I think all of our hope is that we're going to put industry at the table with us during those conversations. It's one of the biggest things we're lacking. The people that we're going to put around that table do industrial development, do commercial development, they do residential, they do retail development. We're going to have those conversations with industry. At the end of the day, this is about building relationships with industry and nothing more than that. That's what this position's hired to do. We already can do that and other processes that we have happening within the city already that we're allocating time and resources to. So that's, again, I think we're looking at this being a position instead of what's the goal. If the goal and the intent is to get industrial stuff, let's just get a relationship with our industrial partners. That's what this is about. And we can say this person's for that. But I agree with Councillor Clayton. If we're hiring somebody for this position, are they truly going to be an expert for $120,000 all in? I mean, that seems like a lot of money, but to go and get a person that's going to be specializing in just industrial for that sort of money, we've heard it through the Tri-Muni as well. You're not going to attract really credible people that are going to be able to go in and do what we hope they're going to achieve for that sort of money. So I'll come back to close, but yeah.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Platt. Any other discussion or debate? I don't see anybody in the queue. Councillor Platt, was that your close, or do you want to do another? Go ahead.
So I'm going to come back to this and remind us that 80 to 90% of our growth comes organic. And so we're spending what looks to be about half of our budget going after the whale. So I appreciate this position, but maybe I'm more having alignment of how much we're spending on economic development in general. Maybe that's my problem with this, but I don't think this position is going to achieve what we hope it's going to achieve. We've got our canola to key process. We have a land officer that's not inside of this that I remind council that I brought a proposal together, or trying to bring a proposal together of somebody that wanted to build in our city that we don't have our land for sale, so they didn't know we could even do that. There's simple things we can do within our organization to make us open for business. If we have great frontline staff at our counter when you go in and pull out development permitting, that will help our economic development. There's lots of things we can do to help our economic development without hiring a position. I think this is nice to have. I do not think this is going to achieve the goal we want for the $120,000 we're going to spend. And as much as I love the whole, it takes money to spend money to make money, would you really spend $1 to get $1? Is that a really good use of money to spend $1 to get $1? So I'm hoping you guys realize that this is not a need we have to have right now. I want to support administration. I do not see this as a need at this point. I'd love to have more conversation with economic development in general, because it's something that's very, very close to my heart. It's something I've been doing for 26 years. I just don't think this position is going to achieve what we're hoping it's going to achieve.
Okay, thanks for that close, Councillor Platt. We'll call for the vote on Councillor Platt's motion to not approve the Economic Development Officer position for 2020. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does not carry. My understanding is that this is reflected in the 2020 budget. Is that correct? And so if council doesn't, so it's a bit of a difficult position. We're obviously at a tie there. It is currently on administration's recommendation in the budget. So I don't know that we're in a position to be able to take any other action on that item. Yeah. So yeah, then Councillor Palat,
and I think I can appreciate that it was a split vote, and we're a little bit torn on this. So I'm going to try a subsequent motion of that. My motion is that we defund economic development by $100,000. My hope with that is you can keep this position, but it forces economic development to look at the rest of their spending and how many conferences and other things they're going to. I think we can meet the intent. If it's this important to have this person be part of the city, and we think that we really need an industrial strategist person, great. Then we probably don't need to be going to as many conferences and doing as many things as we do to attract the whale. We have lots of whales at Grande Prairie that are willing to invest if the market was right. And that's the other thing, is we're trying to invest money in an area right now where I build homes. I'm not building homes for a reason. And you're not going to get guys doing just show up and do industrial development if there's no money in it. So the timing is important on these things as well. So if the will is, and I want to support administration if they think this position is important, I just don't think that we should be spending that much more on economic development in general. So if we can achieve that by hiring this position and defunding economic development by $100,000, let's see if we can make that work.
Okay, so a motion to reduce the Economic Development Department budget by $100,000. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Even though you end up convincing me on the last motion and I supported you, I don't think I can support this one. I think that it's just, I don't understand what goes into that department budget, and I think just picking a number concerns me. I think that last year we had a similar conversation about another department where we wondered, is it too high, but we didn't know how to make cuts, and we ended up saying, hey, we'd like to review this early next year. If there was a motion like that, I might support that, but I think for me, just I don't know enough about this budget right now, and I don't think I'm going to learn enough from any questions I could ask right in this moment to support this motion right now. So supporting the last one, don't necessarily disagree with your intent, but just I think it's a little bit too rash for what we can have in front of us today.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Palat's motion? I guess my question I would have a question for the director. To what extent is I have no sense of how much, similar to Councillor Bressie, I don't think there's enough information here to be able to support a motion like this. And to my point, I don't have a sense of whether there is discretionary or consultancy funding or, like if we cut $100,000, I have no idea where that would come from at this stage. Yeah, Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I can give you a sense of what the biggest line items would be in economic development for just scale here. So travel is at $30,000. Advertising and promotion is $70,000. Other consulting services are $60,000, and those would be anything over $20,000 as an individual line item. Printing and binding would be the next biggest one at $13,000. That includes things like the relocation guide for the city and any other promotional material.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Clayton?
Sorry, I lost my train of thought processing those numbers. You'll have to come back to me. Thank you.
Okay, Council, I will say I won't support the motion. Again, for me, this really comes down to our level of comfort with the administrative team that we've set up. We directed administration and the organization to establish a long-term economic development strategy. We engaged the community in building that strategy. That strategy has been approved by council. Administration takes direction on what resources are needed to achieve that strategy. And in a year where they recommended to us 22 reductions in positions across the organization, and they only recommended 8 additions, I have to believe that administration is looking at these recommendations very, very carefully. And I, even with the benefit of my time on council as a politician, wouldn't feel comfortable in that context where we've established a plan with the support of the community and people that we all targeted and nominated to help us establish that plan, and then tasked our professionals that work in this day, in their day-to-day lives all the time, to come forward with recommendations on how to resource that. I'm not going to substitute my judgment on if it could be done differently. Like, we've engaged in a multi-year process to get to where we are in this recommendation. We have a management team that is cutting more positions than they're recommending adding. I have to believe that this is needed. And so for that reason, I can't support what I think is a position that substitutes our judgment on something that is actually more technical than it is political. Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Mayor Given. In regards to the motion on the floor, I don't want to support it, but I will, only because the prior motion didn't pass. And the thought behind it from my perspective is that there's no better spokesperson for the region than people that live, invest, have built businesses. There's nobody better. Those people can sell the region to the world because they know the opportunities. They know what it's like to live here. They know what the weather's like, how it is to get through winter. They know all the opportunities and all the great things. So those resources of our local investors, our local business owners, our local people are the strongest strength, in my opinion, that economic development should be using. And I hear often that they're underutilized. The resources of our people that have made their successes on this region aren't being utilized. Council didn't support the opportunity of removing that position. So the only way, in my opinion, for us to have a little bit of an opportunity in economic development to get some return, if we reduce their budget, which I don't want to do, at least maybe then they'll be forced to make tougher decisions and be leaner, and in turn use some free spokespeople. These people, the industry and economic, or the industry providers and people in retail and people in commercial ventures, they want to be used, and right now they're not being used. So if the support of council is to hire a position, fine, hire the position. Therefore, I feel the department needs to find some efficiencies through other ways. So I encourage you to support the motion.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a question. This is for Director Walker, and this goes back to the start of our budget process. Last year, Council set out some funding for specific initiatives. Remind me again, what did we put in for economic development and what's still available?
Director Walker?
Thank you, Mayor Given. Perhaps Shane could put up the slide so that you can refresh your memories. These are the strategic initiatives that Council has identified, and economic development opportunities were identified there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Seeing that in front of me, I can't support a $100,000 operational budget line. Perhaps if we were talking about our economic development opportunities budget line, because operational funds are there to support the department. This is all just extra stuff that council added in last year. So if we want to see a reduction in our investment in economic development opportunities, and maybe for a one-time thing while we evaluate a new position, I could get behind that and reduce this, and then we're doing the exact same in savings. But according to what I see on the screen, that's plain as day, is that we still have $375,000 up there to cut. So I think that would be the more responsible cut if we want to reduce from economic development. I get that as for opportunities, but even hiring this position is to create more economic development opportunities.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I'd recognize the Infrastructure and Economic Development Director.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Management is proposing to fund the tri-municipal partnership out of that pot of funding, and our next anticipated invoice is $235,000. That would be in addition to the $125,000 that has been allocated to date.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Palat's motion to reduce the Economic Development Department budget by $100,000? Seeing nobody else in the queue, Councillor Palat, do you want a chance to close? No? Then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you, everybody. I think there's one that maybe didn't register. Just make sure that you're, thank you. And that motion does not carry. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'd like to make a motion that we, sorry, we're putting some work on administration here. We're putting some stuff on the outstanding items list potentially, but I'd like to see a report come back for the last 2 years of where our growth come from, broke down into residential, commercial, industrial, and office to the appropriate standing committee for us to review.
Okay, that motion, we've been pretty accepting of requests for information from council. Any discussion or debate on that motion? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. So is this for, in terms of your asking for assessment growth, where that came from?
Councillor Platt.
Yeah, correct. Like if we're talking about economic development, what growth it creates, I think this is growth that's been created the last couple of years that we can quantify and we can see in which areas we're receiving it. So it would be nice maybe for council to have that. And my hope is that we can have another conversation about this at that point. Obviously, there's no will to move forward with what I was proposing today, but I'm hoping as we drill down the details, we'll realize just how maybe little impact some of the times we have on our growth and how much of it is organic.
Okay, thanks.
And I'll speak to that.
Councillor Bressie?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I think I'm going to be voting against this because I don't see what benefit that brings us in terms of economic development. As I think about it, I might be interested for other reasons, but I think a problem with this is respectfully, you seem to be equating economic development just with assessment growth, and I think that's definitely part of economic development. I think that's definitely part of what we want to get out of this department. But it's not just about assessment growth. It's also about having more jobs for our residents. It's also about having a more complete economy so that our kids, when they graduate GPRC, they can pursue their chosen field. It's about having opportunities for significant growth in the future. And yeah, I'm gonna be voting against this motion because I don't think it helps. It gives me a full enough picture. I don't see it helps me make decisions about economic development. But as we're talking about economic development, let's remember that assessment growth is a really important part of it, but it's not the only thing we're talking about in economic development.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. I'll just say that I won't support the motion for the same reason. I don't think it gets at the heart of, I think, what the intent maybe is. I would agree that that economic development is not necessarily assessment. The city, growing the city's revenue is a specific function and an outcome, potentially, of economic development, but so is filling up vacant space in places that are already paying property tax. So that's the type of stuff that you wouldn't see. And this is endemic across municipal services, guys, that it's very, very difficult to track an investment in a service to an outcome in a lot of spots. In some cases, we're looking for things that we avoid by investing up front, like prevention activities. And in this case, the City of Grande Prairie and the Economic Development Department guided the development of a retail market analysis, which was shared freely and widely by many of our business owners and the real estate community to help fill up existing spaces. And it actually probably was very, very challenging, if at all possible, to track who came to Grande Prairie because of that piece of information that our department developed. But it was absolutely an important function and contribution that we made to the overall economic development of the community. So I think the idea of saying, well, what growth have we seen in assessment and new tax-paying properties is a part of the picture. It is such a tiny pinhole view of the entire system that I don't think it provides the value that you're looking for, Councillor Platt, so I won't support the motion. I've got Councillor Platt and then Councillor Clayton.
I'm just to close, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I appreciate your comments. I guess, unless I'm misunderstanding the motion, I think that the intent of the motion is to get a piece of information to inform council of the entire package isn't what he was looking for. So a piece of the information will help us provide us information of some of the component of what economic development is doing. It's not to make decisions based on your opinion of economic development based on this one piece of information. It's just a piece of information. I encourage council to support this. It's not that we want to review the net worth of the Department of Economic Development based on this piece of information. It's just a piece of information that would be nice to know. So I would encourage you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Councillor Platt to close.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Yeah, that's exactly what this is to me. This is information where I think if we had this for the last 15 or 20 years, we would have red flagged where we were losing market share already. And I think this is information that regardless of what you feel with economic development spending in their budgets, we should know this stuff. And it should be something we all understand every year of where we're growing and where we're contracting. And I think this is good data for economic development to have every year. If we're not getting industrial growth than we have for 5 years, then maybe that changes how we do some of our canola to key field process. Maybe we have to update some of our land use planning and some of some of the red tape that maybe is coming around why that's stopping. I think this data is important data for us to have to understand it. If we were in business, we'd want to know that sort of information. And so I think this is information that I don't think is going to be hard for administration to come up with. We had a similar data come to us at corporate services. It would just be nice to have it broken out into certain areas. I went to 2 conferences in the last year that are worried about office growth. Maybe our office growth is doing great in Grande Prairie. It'd sure be nice to know that. I don't know where our office growth is at. I don't know where our industrial growth is at. We talk about land use planning. If we don't know that sort of information, how do we know the framework of what we're trying to achieve with our land use planning in the future? If markets are contracting and we're not seeing that trend and that pattern, that should directly impact how we're planning and thinking about our future. So whether you want this to be an economic development model or not, I personally do. I think the information is very important for council to understand and for our staff to understand so we know where our contractions and our growths are. So I really urge you to support that.
Thanks, Councillor Plott. Can we have the motion read back, please? Just want to make sure your microphone still works.
Sure. Moved by Councillor Plott, recommend a report from administration come back to the appropriate standing committee on what growth has been created as part of the assessment base in commercial, industrial, and residential development as it relates to economic development.
And office. Okay, so we've heard the motion and got that clarification. I will call for the vote. Please vote. Motion does not carry. Councillor O'Toole.
Mayor Given, are we still looking for a motion to adopt the new position, or fund the position? I'd like to make that motion, please, that we fully fund the position that administration requested for the economic development officer.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I'm just confused if this motion is voted on and it doesn't pass. I'm just kind of confused of where we are. That leaves us in an awkward place in terms of this is in the budget, but we voted not to have it in the budget, but a motion to endorse it being in the budget might not pass, and we already defeated a motion to take it out of the budget. So it just seems like this motion could leave us in an awkward place. So I'm just kind of highlighting that, asking what happens if this motion fails.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify the process, these positions are built in the budget, so no action, particularly for these line items, the 8 positions, would mean that at the end of the session, when you approve a tax rate impact, these numbers are embedded into that final approval. So we don't need this. Our intent was to present this to council for information and looking for endorsement. These numbers are built into the budget, so except if you specifically remove items, by default are embedded and means approved. Thank you.
Okay. Got that clarification. Councillor Thiessen?
I guess I was sort of thinking the same thing when I pushed my button for requests, because there's lots of times where we make decisions as a council where things die on a tie vote. This is a motion to the negative that died on a tie vote, so I wasn't even certain that we had to re-vote, but I would probably tip my hand to our city clerk or legislative services people, but I think the city manager just filled that in. Thanks.
I would encourage council to consider supporting the motion. If there are other questions that we have about the approach to economic development, then fair enough to ask those through the course of the year. At some stage, we need to acknowledge when we're not on the winning side and you go along and support things that maybe didn't go your way the first time. I will say that I have been in that position many times, and it is a part of the process of being a group of 9 or right now 8 people trying to make decisions together. And so I would just ask council members to consider their vote in that context, where it's clear that there is a desire to remove this. It is management's recommendation that it is in, and we have an opportunity to express an opinion saying, okay, there are some of us maybe that don't agree with that, but fine then, let's continue to move forward onto all the other things that we need to deal with in context of our budget. Councillor Bressie?
Thank you. I was going to say something similar in that I did end up supporting Councillor Plott's motion to remove this from the budget, but I'll be supporting this motion as well, just because I don't want us put in an awkward position of council didn't endorse something that is still in the budget. So I think it's important that we recognize that. So I'll be switching my vote, although I don't know if my position's changed. I'll be switching my vote for the sake of yielding to what council's decided so far.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Goodwin. It's not often that I'm going to 180 my position on this, but I will in this case because I do want to support administration. I am going to make a comment, though, that I'm certainly hoping that this council is going to have some more conversations about what the goal and the intent of economic development is so we can have future conversations. I'm a little bit disappointed last motion was defeated because that was good data for us to have. But I'll be bringing that up at a committee meeting, and I'll be bringing up other things at committee meetings about economic development specifically. But for today, if the will of council is that they see the value in this, which I'm obviously not there, I will support it on wanting to work with this council and administration. But just know that there'll be some subsequent motions coming out committee. I'm hoping you're to support back.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Platt. I don't see anybody else with any additional discussion or debate on Councillor O'Toole's motion, so I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. Next up, we had the Fleet Operations Supervisor position. Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Mayor. I will move the approval for the Fleet Maintenance Department.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Minhas, vote to endorse the position as recommended by administration. Any discussion or debate on that motion? Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Goodwin. I'll be supporting this motion. I think I've had a lot of conversations at committees about some dissatisfaction about this department and some of the spending in there. And I think this is great for us to put more oversight in, as Director Miller has stated. A 22-to-1 ratio or so is not a healthy ratio. So I think this is a smart hire, and I appreciate you guys putting it forward.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Platt. I don't see anyone else in the queue. Then I'll call for the vote on Councillor Minhas's motion. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Friesen.
Thanks. So I would like to go to the ones in the Chief of Staff office. I would like to suggest, move that Council endorse both the positions for the Chief of Staff office, both Manager of Strategy and Engagement Officer.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Friesen. So one motion inclusive of those two pieces. I see Councillor O'Toole, Councillor Thiessen, and Councillor Clayton. Councillor O'Toole.
So I just want to clarify, these are new positions. They're not enhancing any other position at this point in time?
Thanks, Staff. Given that is correct. These would be new positions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'm fully in support of this. I think one direction that this council has given to our administration is that we want to be clear in our communications out in the public, and that we want to bring everything into alignment so our whole organization is focused and coming with our communication from one source. Also with the Manager of Strategy, that also helps us in a variety of ways, whether we're talking with provincial or federal officials. I just think this is a smart move, and thank you for administration for hearing the wishes of council, because I know I'm looking at one of them right across from me who's this is a very big thing for him. So, and I think this helps address that.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Question for administration. Can you give me a little bit more information on the first position listed there? Can't remember the name of the list.
Manager of Strategy is what it's currently titled. The working title, I think I heard Mr. Borg say.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'll start with just the genesis. The original title was it wasn't intended to have a broad reach of reporting staff to it. The title was intended to have give it significance in its reach across the organization when it would be dealing with other managers, as CLT would task this for things where in the past we may have created a foreman fold, not necessarily because we wanted advice from many different departments, but that was where our bright lights and our horsepower was in those. We believe this is a position that we could use to task for some of those projects that don't require the knowledge of different departments, but they require the analysis and the project development.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we split these two?
Yeah, we can absolutely split these two and vote on them separately. So request a split. And so we'll deal first with the so-called Manager of Strategy that Mr. Bork just described. So any discussion or debate on that position? I don't see anybody ringing in. Then I will call for the vote on just the first of the two positions in the Chief of Staff area. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries, and then we will vote on the second, or discussion debate on the second position, the engagement officer. Councillor Bressie.
Likely not a surprise to council, but I am wholeheartedly in support of this position. I'm very excited to see this in the proposed budget. I hope council will unanimously support it. I think that in a democracy, it costs money to do democracy right, and I think this is an area where we do need increased engagement or increased resources to give people an opportunity to engage with the city. I think there's value in that in terms of informing our decisions, the decisions of staff. I also think that there's value in this even when people don't take advantage of opportunities. They're getting value out of this, knowing that they were able to have a say in their government. I'm very nervous about the tone that political discussions take in our culture, in our community these days. And I think a lot of the reason for that tone is people feel powerless to have input in what their government does. I think we as a local government are the best positioned to give people a voice and give people a sense of power over the destiny of the community. And I think that that takes intentional resources. So I'm so excited to see this in the budget. I hope the council supports it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate on this motion? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries as well. And with that, I think before we enter into capital, maybe we'll take a 10-minute bio break and have a chance for everybody to stand up, stretch their legs, and we'll come back and start in about at about 25 after with our capital discussions. Everybody, we will continue on with our 2020 budget discussion. Next up is capital. Administration has some recommendations for additions to the capital plan. And I just want to check whether we're going to start with an overview. We had heard at the start of our budget presentation about the funding that's available. And were we going to start there, Mr. City Manager? Okay. So I think we'll start with a little bit of a look at the available funding for capital, just for council information. I think we have a slide on that, and then we move into the directors describing the capital items in their service areas, and we'll go from there. So I don't know, Ms. Walker, if you want to sort of orient us to this chart that we see here. I mean, it's somewhat self-explanatory, but if there's anything that you want to highlight, I'd give you that opportunity before we move into description of specific projects that the service area directors might have. Director Walker.
Thank you for your patience, Mayor Given. So what you see before you is the capital funding available after we've funded the projects that you're about to see as additions. So the entire capital plan is funded in its entirety, and we do have approximately we do have the funding amounts available in each one of those categories. Now, of course, when one project is funded by a particular source, there are some limitations around what can be funded under what program. However, just so you know, all of the capital projects that you're about to see have been funded, and this is what's left over.
Okay. As a reminder for council, we are required by provincial law to establish a multi-year capital plan. And so administration's giving us the recommendation of things that are within this window and showing us what the fund balances would be after after that time. Okay. Then we'll go, what's our first service area? Is that Protective and Social Services? Director Manuel.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first item that's an addition, I should note all of these additions are all related to the fire department. One thing to note is we will get to deletions after additions. And in our deletions column, we're actually doing a deletion of $175,000 worth of asks in 2020. This will represent a replacement for, I suggest, a net benefit of around $25,000. So the first one up is a $50,000 capital project to hire a consultant to prepare the city for next generation 911 upgrades. It's a technical advisor. Will let us know what is going to be required as in 2022 the existing infrastructure for 911 will no longer be functional across the country. So that's to prepare us for that. The funding source for that is a grant funding. It's through the 911 fees on cell phones and landlines. The next one is a 2021 expenditure. At this point, it's a bit of a placeholder in that the consultant will ultimately let us know what the costs are going to be, but we expect that the costs, the initial costing we have for some of the upgrades required to our dispatch center will be in the neighborhood of the $520,000. So by having it included in the capital plan right now, it will prevent the sticker shock potentially in the subsequent year. And the third item is fire equipment replacement. So what this is prior to 2019, the fire department had a transfer to a fire reserve in their operating budget every year. And the consolidation of the reserves that occurred last year eliminated the fire equipment replacement reserve and consolidated them into one reserve. During that process, the ongoing funding into that reserve to replace things like their bunker gear, self-contained breathing apparatus, fire hoses, it was lost. So this is to put it back into the budget that will essentially allow the life cycle replacement of various pieces of equipment required for firefighting. These aren't new additions or nice to haves. These are replacements of critical equipment.
Thanks very much. these are in the budget already, as we saw before. Those fund balances at the end are assuming that these things are included in going forward. Are there any questions for administration? Councillor Bessie?
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. Just a question about the 911 dispatch stuff. I recall that we do dispatching for a much larger area than just the city. Can you remind me about the funding arrangement for that in terms of, is that revenue neutral? Is that a revenue generator for us?
Director Manuel?
Yeah, certainly. So you're right. Our dispatch center is broken into two primary components. One of them is the 911 call answer, and we do that for a really defined geographical area, which is large, about the size of northwestern Alberta. And the second component is fire dispatch in itself. So that's where individual municipalities enter into contract with us. There's a kind of per capita formula, I believe, that's utilized to determine what that cost recovery is. The exact percentage of breakdown, we do try to operate it on a cost recovery basis, though. And that will be part of our review as to the fire service as a whole next year, will be what cost recovery truly looks like, considering things such as the capital investments.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the next area? Okay, seeing nothing, then our next slide up is infrastructure and economic development. Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor. Given management's proposing including $250,000 per year as development incentives, that would give council some flexibility on incentivizing new development in the city. That could include bolstering downtown incentives, or that could include perhaps some of the new powers in the MGA around incentivizing development.
Okay, any questions for administration? Councillor Palat.
Just a question on this. So, just so I understand, if this wasn't fully utilized in a year, would that go back into just general revenue, or would this roll over to future years if it wasn't fully utilized?
Thank you, Mayor Given. This would roll over in the capital budget, so it would be cumulative over the years.
So if we spent $150 next year, there'd be $350 available?
That's correct.
Okay.
Dr. Glavin, would there be, when would you imagine coming forward to council for direction, policy direction on what type of program there would be? Or is it, appreciated this, it appears at this stage that this is a placeholder amount to support council's involvement in a wide variety of potential options. Where would you see council having a discussion about what path we wanted to take?
Thank you, Mayor Given. This money is fairly flexible, and obviously there's a number of different ways it could be utilized. Management is looking forward to bring our first proposal. I think we're intending by the end of the year, if not the first quarter, on opportunities for incentivizing land development.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bessie.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. Question about, I know we've got downtown incentives that we funded some in 2019. I honestly can't remember what happens to those going beyond that, but is this over and beyond any downtown incentive programs, or would downtown incentive programs be encompassed in this? Or can you just jog my memory?
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbons. So in 2019, Council approved $250,000 for the downtown incentive program while stripping out the facade portion of that. The program is open and is accepting applications. I know there are some applications in front of it. However, there will be a surplus in that. This is not specifically for the downtown. It is not. We don't have a specific allocation. This is in anticipation of future programs.
Go ahead, Councilor Bessie.
So I'm hearing there's still some money from, if I'm hearing right, there's still some money left from the 2019 downtown incentives program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in the budget, is there additions to the downtown incentive program for 2020, or is it, if council takes no action, is it just done after the 2019 money is used?
Dr. Glavin?
We aren't requesting any additions to that program, and there are none in the budget, so it would be whatever the balance of the 250.
And or council would have an opportunity to direct these funds to that purpose if they chose. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Platt?
Similar to, thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Similar to Councillor Bressy's question, do we know how much money is left from last year's allocation?
I believe approximately $230,000.
So 230 to 250 wasn't utilized?
That's correct.
Okay. Anything further on this item? And seeing none, what was our next service area?
Community services.
Thank you. Community services. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mayor Given. So first item is exterior landscaping. So what we'd like to do is redo some landscaping over at MCC. It would be trimming of shrubs, removal of the mulch, repair of the irrigation system. And the primary concern there is the way it's structured right now is there's some safety concerns. We've inadvertently, I guess, created some hiding spaces for people to I guess some of the, well, we found a fair number of needles in the area, so it's a safety risk for the patrons. And we've had patrons come up to us and point out needles in different areas. So it's actually a recommendation from the 2014 safety audit completed by Crime Prevention that we redo the landscaping. So it's a $40,000 ask for that. And then Teresa Sargent Hall, we'd like to build a partition wall, and this would allow us to install a glass wall, and it would be on the south entrance. So we'd partition off the hall. It would be more of a less disruptive space. I think right now people can walk in the south doors while there's an event going on. So by creating the wall, it would be a more desirable rental space, and we'd anticipate increased rental revenue as a result. Next up is the recreation needs assessment for the Avondale ARP, and that's to do with the school site. With that development, we'd like to, we're seeking $80,000 for a consultant to do a recreational assessment, so we do all the right things with that site in the future. And then next up is the Nighthawk. It's part of the city's share of the Nighthawk capital plan as per the regional split. So it's 25% from the city, 25% from the county, and 50% from the MD. And the capital project would be snowmaking equipment, other equipment that could be used on the hill for hill improvements, and also erosion control. And then the next up is the Ernie Radburn Pavilion concession renovation to the office space. That's a $70,000 ask. And it was to repurpose the space into a more functional space. Could be several offices and also a multi-purpose room. And again, focusing on increased revenue space or revenue opportunities. And then the last on the list here is the Ernie Radburn Pavilion garage renovation. And our initial plan was to renovate that into a programming space. However, a recent development is with the autonomous mowers. Our plan is to store the mowers there, so this one could actually be deferred to 2021.
So is it on that particular one, administration's recommendation to remove that then?
Yes, to remove it and place it in 2021. By that time, we should know if that's a suitable site for the autonomous mowers or not.
Okay. So do we need a specific council motion on that?
There's that throw.
Sorry, I see the corporate services was in the queue anyway. So Susan, if you wanted to give us an opinion on that, and then whatever other information you had for us.
Thank you, Mayor Given. We can just move it into 2021 if that is management's recommendation.
Okay. And then Susan, I saw that you were in the queue already anyhow. Go ahead.
So I inadvertently misled you, and my apologies, but I noticed that there are two items on the community services list that are in there as unfunded. One being the exterior landscaping, and the second one being the Nighthawk Community Group funding.
Yes, I was going to ask about that. So, so what we see on the slide in front of us, are those items actually reflected in the budget as unfunded items? So those are examples of where, so I'm at a bit of a loss. So is administration recommending that those go forward, or what should we go by? What's on the screen, or what's in our package in terms of administration's recommendation?
So they are unfunded, so we would ask that council make a motion to fund them, and then we'll find a funding source.
Okay. So those two specific things are different than the others on the list, in that if you look at your budget package that was handed out. On page 16, you'll see under events and entertainment, exterior landscaping, $40,000 unfunded. And then on page 18, near the top of the page, you'll see Nighthawk Community Group funding unfunded. So those items are in, as they stand in the budget now, they are unfunded. And I think the advice from administration is if council wishes to fund them, then we would need specific motions on each of those. All of the rest of the items are in the budget already. Okay. Now that we've cleared things up, Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Rick. Just a question on the partition wall at the Montrose Cultural Center. I'm just wondering if that'll be open during the day for people that are in the facility, or if the plan is to actually just put a wall up and it would be closed for events.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Sorry, we can find that answer very quickly, but I don't know what the intent would be. I assume it would be closed, but we can find out.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Toole.
Make a motion to fund the Nighthawk Community Group funding as it is unfunded. I'd move that we do fund it, please.
Motion to fund the Nighthawk Community Group funding. Open for discussion and debate.
Security.
Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I'm just curious. Is this part of a is Nighthawk funding part of a long-term capital plan in terms of, is this a request that we're likely to see year after year after year, and should we be planning long-term for this funding, or is it? I know they're having some specific issues with erosion this year and some other emergency issues. So is this an emergency request, or is this one that should be regular in our budget potentially?
Mr. Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think it's. I would anticipate there's always going to be an ask from Nighthawk. It's an excellent facility just south of the city, and there's always going to be needs in my estimation. So perhaps I think Councillor Clayton may have additional information. But
sure, Councillor Clayton was our past rep on that. I think Councillor Thiessen is our new rep. Councillor Clayton?
Yeah, to my knowledge, and unless something has changed in the last few weeks while I wasn't there, the expectation is that this facility, as it goes over time, will still require capital upgrades. There's chairlift maintenance and replacement needs. There will continue to be capital requests over the years. And at this point, the expectation's always been 50% was paid by the municipal district of Greenview and 25% by each the city and the county.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mervyn. Do we know on that note then if the MD is willing to throw in their 323,000 and the county's going to throw in theirs? I guess for me, I want to make sure that we approve something in principle, but I would want to make sure that it's in principle that if there other funding streams aren't there, that I wouldn't want to approve this. So I'm wondering how we could, I guess, answer that, or how we could determine that.
So one thing that we have done in the past is we've sort of added a subject to the end of this kind of resolution. So Councillor O'Toole's motion to approve the funding, somebody else might wish to amend to say subject to approval of appropriate funding from the MD of Greenview and the County of Grand Prairie. To really make it clear to administration that our intent is not just to write the check and send it over January 1st, but to check that our other municipal partners are also supporting the facility before we pop the check in the mail.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's something that Councillor O'Toole's okay with, or okay, I'll leave it for him then. Thank you.
So Councillor O'Toole, are you incorporating that into your motion? Okay. So Councillor Platt, you want to make that amendment?
Yes, please. I would just amend it that we would ensure that it was a subject to that this we wouldn't be funding it unless the other funding streams come in from the other partners.
Okay. Okay. So that motion, I think, is that amendment is clear. Mr. Miller, do you have something additional?
No, I was just going to commit that if that is a motion, we'll make sure we do that before we cut a check.
Okay. Any discussion or debate on the amendment as proposed by Councillor Palat? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. So we're on Councillor O'Toole's main motion as amended. Any discussion or debate on that main motion as amended? Councillor Bressie?
Actually, I'll wait for a follow-up.
Okay. Okay. Thanks very much. I don't see anybody else for discussion and debate, so I'll call for the vote. Please vote. That motion carries. Councillor Bressy.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. I know that something this, if my recollection is, this appeared unfunded on our capital plan last year as well, and I noticed it's not funded long term. It's going to be a long term plan. I'd like to see it be a long term in our capital discussions so that we're not having to do this year after year. So I'm kind of looking for some guidance in terms of, is that a thought I could leave with the administration? Maybe we see something different next budget. Would you like specific direction out of? Would you like me to try to make a motion? If so, any advice on what motion I could make?
I think two different things. This is probably in the nature of advice to administration and to our representative on the Nighthawk board. This is why council has representatives on some community organizations, is to communicate council's desire or intent. And so part of that would be, hey, external organization would be really helpful to us if we understood your long-term needs rather than annual asks. Other organizations may work on more of an annual basis, but the City of Grande Prairie prefers to do long-term planning. And so our representative tonight could obviously carry that message, as could administration. I think that's probably not necessary to have a motion to do that. Probably really is just the nature of advice. Okay. Okay, so the other item that was not currently in, and if council wanted to take specific action, that would be to add the exterior landscaping at the Library Art Gallery facility. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, and thank you to administration for bringing this forward and for recognizing it was unfunded. I actually had this flagged. Normally, I like peeling things out of capital. This is one that I flagged that I wanted to peel into capital. It's a small item, $40,000. Now, understanding the context, answered the questions I already had about improving safety around our facility downtown, and I would support to add this into our budget.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Any discussion or debate on Councillor Thiessen's motion to approve the addition of $40,000 of funding for exterior landscaping? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Now, I think all the rest of the items were already in, unless there's any other specific action the council needed, so we could look at our next service area. Councillor Thiessen, did you have something with respect to this area?
Yeah, just a question. Thanks, Mayor Given. Director Miller, in regards to the Ernie Radburn Pavilion concession renovation to office space, it sounded pretty vague as to what the outcome was. In our package, it says office space, so that's pretty direct, but you said office space or other revenue generation. Part of my concern is I've seen how renovations go in and around city facilities. To convert a full kitchen into an office space seems really, really cheap for $70,000, and I would hate to just go ahead and do that and then all of a sudden see it balloon up to $200,000 without any clear direction as to what it could be. Is it just we're not using the kitchen and we're getting rid of it and we don't know yet, but this seems like a good start?
Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So that was what the plan was, to remove the kitchen equipment, and it hasn't been used for quite a amount of time, is what I understand. And then office space and perhaps a rental opportunity for a room rental is what Ms. McGriskin has proposed for it.
Okay. Councillor Clayton.
Sorry, it's not on this topic, but in the same bucket. Okay. So I wondered, Director Miller, if you could give me a little bit more of the vision of what the reception area renovation is, or is it just a new floors and a paint job? What are you looking at there?
Second working station. Okay.
Dr. Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So Stephanie provided information that she believes it's a second workstation, and that would allow us to have 2 employees or 2 staff members sitting in the front, which also addresses the work in a low concern that I brought forward earlier. So safety concern, yes.
Okay. Councillor Bressy.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm struggling with the Therese Sargent Hall partition wall, just in terms of it's not quite what I pictured it being in here, and it's not the budget for me. I'm very concerned about that really changing the feel of that space in terms of both when events aren't there, freedom to go in there. Also, I'm thinking of events that I've been in events where it's an issue, people walk through it's a distraction, but at the same time, when I'm in a big event there, I love seeing that big glass polar bear, and I think it really, I'm scared that a wall, especially if some designs that I could think of, would really take away from the feel of that space and one of the most spectacular public pieces of art we have in Grand Prairie. So I'm gonna move that council direct administration not to move forward with construction of the partition wall without council approval.
Maybe the other way of doing that is direct administration bring forward ultimate design before issuing construction tenders. Like something the other way around, say the intent is show us what you're going to do just so we can feel comfortable with it before you go ahead.
Yes, direct administration to get council approval on design. Or I'm open to any friendly amendments, but I don't want to remove the funding. But
want to have more confidence around the design and that that council will see the design before administration proceeds to construction. Okay, Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I just wanted to address the other question about will it be open during the day or not. And it's our understanding from the acting general manager that it would be open to the public during the day, closed during events to allow privacy.
So Councillor Bressy's got a motion, which, so by the way, I would support. I think there are some instances with very front-facing infrastructure that it's worthwhile for council just to make sure that we're confident that it's going to meet the intent of the facility. And because there are things that are functional and operational, but don't necessarily meet sort of the community intent. So I'd support Councillor Bressy's motion to direct administration to bring forward the design before proceeding to construction tender. Councillor Clayton.
Sorry, I'll wait till the motion. It's another.
Okay. Any other discussion on Councillor Bressy's motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion carries. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I would move that council support the item ELC wood floor in the field house. I would like to change the funding source to unfunded. Speaking to that motion, I think this is a nice to have. From my understanding, the facility, this could be done in the next few years, not even possibly required to be done in this term. Therefore, if there's a preference from administration that it be removed rather than unfunded, I'm fine to amend that. But at this point, I won't support the spending of $350,000 on a new field house floor.
Okay, so Councillor Clayton, I know I've seen it, just I'm not catching the, oh, there it is. Yeah, page 16, thank you. Yeah. So there's $350,000 in 2020 funded through capital tax for wood floor in the field house. Councillor Clayton's motion is to reflect that as unfunded, meaning the project wouldn't go forward. Open for discussion debate. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a matter of process. I was my understanding that we're just doing the additions into the budget here, and we weren't taking a quick overview. If we have items that we've flagged ourselves at this point, is this the point in our budget where we're making motions to take them out rather than just talk about the additions that are being added in?
Turn on my own microphone. We had set up for administration to advise us of additions and deletions. They have slides presented to do that. I appreciate that council members may have opinions about other items in here. It is council's budget. And so we can either do that now, which I was sort of prepared to allow that to happen, would mean that a little bit of a hitch in the step of administration in terms of, they're prepared to demonstrate the other deletions that they're proposing. So I'm really kind of fine either way. I think in the end, we're going to have to vote on them. And we either do it now or we flag things till tomorrow and whatever. I would just advise that if there are things that administration hadn't prepared to present on, it's likely that they don't have that information at hand. Because then, for example, if I said, why did administration advise this be included? I'm not 100% sure if Director Miller would be, yeah. And it's possible that they got a heads up, and if they did, that's great. But if we're starting to go through and pick things that we just need to be prepared that the answer may be, we'll get back to you tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I was going with. I thought we're just getting an overview of the new stuff coming in and the stuff that was taken out. So once we had that in context, then we could go over our list of our own personal flagged item or items for more information that we would require in order to make a decision upon. So whatever works for administration, I guess I'm good with. But if we're going to peel it out now, I've got a whole bunch flagged.
Okay, Well, we'll make sure then let's do that before we conclude the capital stuff today, and get those on the record so that we can make sure that administration has full opportunity to prepare. I understand in this case, Councillor Clayton let Director Miller know she was going to be asking questions about this. Before we conclude today, we'll get all those other ones that people might wish to discuss out so that administration has an opportunity to gather any information they might need for them. Okay. Councillor, I'll go to Director Miller first with some of the technical details and then come back to Councillor Plott.
Right. Thanks, Mayor Given. So I was given a heads up about the wooden floor at the field house, so I do have a bit of information. The wooden floor was initially put into the capital plan by the previous general manager. And so the current general manager, we've had discussions with her, and we recognize there's other wooden surfaces in the community, so it's not essential that Eastlink has a wooden surface. However, what we'd like to do is she's proposing a different option, and it's to the existing floor still has a good lifespan, but it does present some challenges that we can't core into the floor, and oftentimes for setting nets, it's nice to drill it through the floor into for more secure spaces. So if we could retain some of the funding, what we'd like to do is purchase different equipment that's more suitable for like volleyball nets and badminton nets, and then it would allow us to better host tournaments. And we could adjust the heights a lot easier for the netting equipment. And what she would also propose is if we had some of the funding, we'd redo some of the lines that are on the floor right now. And we'd focus on the more popular sports, and we'd remove the lines that were in place for the sports that are less popular and where we're not utilizing the current lines. We would focus on things like pickleball. And right now, pickleball is, they're attending a lot at Eastlink, and they love the facility. So to try to accommodate them for the winter season, and we know we're a winter city, as well as futsal. And she just, Angela Redding feels that would be a lot better use of the space that we do have, and we could capitalize on the revenue sources then, and meet what the demand is in the community. And her estimation to do that is in the $200,000 range, so we could give back $150,000 of the capital funding.
Okay. Thanks, Director Miller. Councillor Plott, just have to get your microphone there.
Thanks, Mayor Given. A similar question I had was around the fitness equipment update, and I apologize I hadn't brought that in advance, but I just wanted to see if I can get some more information on that.
So let's just flag that item.
So yeah, I'd flag that, I guess.
So let's keep our stuff in the context of the item that's up for discussion right now. Appreciate where we've gone a little bit sideways there. So we'll deal with the one that Councillor Clayton raised that she let the director know in advance. Then we'll go through the presentation that administration had of additions and deletions. Then we'll go through and say, okay, so what do you want to talk about? Let's get them on the list and flag them. Okay. So we're on Councillor Clayton's motion, which was to delete the funding for the wood floor in the field house in full was Councillor Clayton's motion. Is there any other discussion or debate on that motion? I will say that I won't be supportive of the motion for two different reasons. First, because I put significant weight on administration's recommendation that operationally this would allow them to do more things. I know that everything in our organization is looked at revenue generating opportunities. I have to believe, particularly given what Director Miller said, that this would allow more revenue generating capacity. And I heard him offer an alternative of $200,000, which is only $150,000 less. My understanding would be putting in a completely new wood floor would allow you also to reline the floor, like that would be inclusive of it. So you're going to get the new lines in a new wood floor, plus you get a surface that is actually more playable for a wider range of tournaments. There are certain tournaments that will not book on the surface that we have there today. So for the extra $150,000, I believe it actually adds additional functionality. So I won't support the complete removal, and I would just advise council that administration's first recommendation, I believe it's probably wisest. And we got everybody in the queue. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm going to support the motion because I think for me, I can appreciate that we're trying to rent this facility out a lot, but there is a lot of members that go there solely to use the field house. And I know I try to go there lots with my kids, and it's tough to find space in there. So as much as it'd be nice to repurpose it and add lines and do different things, it's incredibly challenging to go there most nights and actually get a square foot in there to go play with your child or do events. So I'm not sure about how that, although it'd be a nice enhancement, I don't know if it achieves anything different than what we already are. I think we're already short of field house space, so I can appreciate if we're putting money into creating new field house space. I don't know if modifying this space is really creating anything new, and I think you're going to see a lot of membership push back if they can't use the facility. And again, for me, I don't know how this enhances the facility's usage, overall usage, and we're going to make one person happy to make one person upset would be my gut on this one.
Thanks, Councillor Platt. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. If I think my question's probably for Director Miller. If we went ahead with the wood floor, would we then also need new equipment anyway to because of the coring, and so would there be an additional cost there as well?
Thanks, Mayor Given. That's a very good question, and I'm sorry I don't have the answer if our existing equipment can do multi-purpose, if it's freestanding plus able to, could be a modification, but we can ask Angela Redding and have the answer in a few minutes.
Thanks, Director Miller. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Given Director Miller, just a quick question on the wood floor. I also had it flagged. How old is the floor? What is its age?
Director Miller.
Are we talking like it was there when the building facility was created?
Yes.
So 8 years?
The original floor.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
original floor.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think it is the original floor from 2011.
Okay, so then I'll just speak to this. I'm in support of Councillor Clayton's motion. I like shelf life, and I like getting bang out of our buck. And I've seen this field house used repeatedly, and it's usually full, just like Councillor Platt said. So I think we're getting good use out of it. I don't think it's hit its shelf life. I think this is a want rather than a need, and we're in fiscal times where we need to invest in our needs or what is important in our community, and I don't know if this meets our highest priorities of importance, so I will support Councillor Clayton's motion.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Bessie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'll be supporting this motion, and I think two concerns I've got with the wood floor is, one, I'd point out that the new composite high school, my understanding is coming with a significantly bigger gym, so that's going to be expanding the availability of wood floor space in our city, and who knows if it happens or not, but GPRC's got big hopes about their Sports Excellence Center, and that would also come with very much with a lot more wooden floor. So I'm not clear if it meets a long-term need in our community. I think the bigger issue for me, though, is really what it is what's the Eastlink Center about? And I know we've had some conversations at the committee level about maybe we need to talk about, now that we're 10 years in that building, figuring out a renewed vision for that building. And I really think that's an initiative we should take on. Hope that we've done some work about figuring out what an advisory committee might look like. I hope we form that advisory committee and that we task it with doing some long-term vision of that building, because that really is at the heart of this. And in terms of, is the building about sports excellence? Is it about hosting tournaments? Then yeah, this wood floor probably makes sense. But for me personally, I see the Eastlink Center as a community gathering place. And as a community gathering place, I value spontaneous use more than I value tournament play. I still value tournament play, but spontaneous use is more important to me. And you don't need this wood floor for that spontaneous use. But even more importantly, I think about the wonderful events that I take my kids to the Eastlink Center. I speak as a family that can't afford to go to the Eastlink Center on a regular basis. So we are always there during free events. And at those free events, there's often water for games, wet footwear, food and beverages all over that floor. And the floor we've got right now can handle it. A wood floor, we'd probably have to change our rules, and we'd probably have to change the use of that space. And I think we'd lose some really great use of that space that's available to every member of our community, not just those that are able to afford to be in the Eastlink Center all the time. So for that reason, I'm going to vote against this, not because I don't think that facility is worth investing in, but because it doesn't match my vision of what I think the Eastlink Center is. Again, though, I think we should get a united council vision of what that Eastlink Center is going long term.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bessie. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a question to Mr. Miller. If and when we decide that we need to replace this floor, there's going to be a timeline of where that whole area is going to have to be not in use. And I was just wondering what the timeline would be for during construction and how much of it construction would affect the rest of the building.
Dr. Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I don't have the exact information on that. We could look at that as well, and I could bring back the information.
Okay. I wasn't expecting you to answer that tonight.
Okay. I do have the answer for Councillor Friesen's question, though, that Ms. Redding feels that we would also need to purchase new equipment if it was a wooden floor for the holes in the floor.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so then I would go then to Councillor Clayton to close. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I encourage Council to support this motion. I think administration has been very clear in the discussion that this is not necessary right now, and maybe potentially not at all. If other people were looking to make a motion to transform the existing floor so that it is flexible for other uses, that's a separate motion. But at this point, there is not a need for a wood floor in the Eastlink Center based on discussions with administration, so I encourage you to support the motion.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Clayton, for that close. We'll call for the vote on Councillor Clayton's motion to amend the capital plan to recognize the Eastlink Center wood floor unfunded. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. So let's continue on with the presentations. Council members that may have had items that you wanted to raise, please have those ready, and we'll do them at the conclusion of administration's presentations. Next up, the deletions from the capital plan. Director Manuel.
So as previously noted, these are the reductions from the fire department. They are replaced by the additions. So it's actually a net benefit of $25,000.
I'm just trying to figure out a way that I can say fog nozzle. I just want to say that a lot. I don't know why. So is the capital plan, as I flip through, are these deletions already reflected in the capital plan, or do you need specific council action to delete them?
They are included. Sorry.
I'm asking a double negative. The deletions are included?
They are deleted and the new additions are in. So
okay, so council doesn't need to take a specific action on these deletions. This is for council's information. Thank you. Sure, process question. Councillor Clayton?
To my knowledge, maybe I missed, we haven't gone over the one-by-one additions yet, correct? And if so, can we have them on, because we're doing the existing items we're going to flag and come back to, but the additions that administration put up, we still need to vote on, correct? And if so, can we see them on the screen?
I think we did go through first the service area additions. Now each of the service areas are doing the informing council of the deletions. I'm looking at the city manager. Yeah. So the city manager is saying that's correct. We didn't vote on those additions. Similar to the process before, we're getting information from the directors. Ultimately, council has to approve the capital plan. Like there are separate motions to approve the budget, the capital plan, and we can amend the capital plan, which sounds like we may do. As a matter of fact, we just did. And then we would ultimately have a motion to approve the capital plan as a whole. So let's hear what administration is providing advice on. And then we can have a discussion about things that we may wish to amend in the capital plan that's presented to us, and move forward that way. Okay, so continuing on deletions, is Director Glavin next?
Thank you, Mayor Given. This is actually a planning deletion. This is for statutory plans such as area redevelopment or area structure plans, the municipal development plan. This was previously budgeted, but is no longer necessary to meet any of our obligations.
Okay, thanks very much. Any questions for administration on this point? Director Glavin, I just want to check in the status. You referenced the municipal development plan. I think there was a specific project to do a municipal development plan review. Is that still on the books, and is it separate from this?
That's correct, Mayor Given, and we have sufficient funds to conduct that.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have another service area there? Community services. Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. This is it's an addition for the fleet department, and what actually happened is we corporate facilities management had some excess funds from another project, and there was a need in 2019. We had a staff member who was working out of a different part of the building, whose main focus is part of fleet. So we managed to complete the renovation that was necessary, so we can remove it from 2022.
Okay, thank you. So administration's advice is that this need has been met otherwise using existing funds, and so these funds aren't needed in 2022. Do we have another service error? Or is that the completion of the deletions? That's the completion of the deletions. Then we would move on to any items that council members wish to flag. Councillor Thiessen, and so council, what we'll do is we'll ask council to flag them, and then those would be things that we would review tomorrow, so that we could ensure that we kept a good list of them, that the directors were prepared to be able to speak to them if needed, and then we would move that direction. Councillor Thiessen.
Hey, would you just like me to list them off? All right. I have, well, Councillor Platt already said it, so the Eastlink Centre fitness equipment update, Eastlink Centre pool sanitation system replacement, South Bear Creek off-leash dog park expansion, now the Eastlink Centre flow rider pump and ride surface, Eastlink Centre tunnel repair, emergency fund, just would like more information on that one. Same with the Heritage Village Fire Hall slab replacement. And municipal wireless project. Again, I do it every year, but network and corporate initiatives. Inspection programs. And roads, Old Highway 43 rehab program. I don't need any information. I have a specific question about a crosswalk at the hospital, so that just to inform administration, I'm not looking to cut anything there, maybe an addition or just information on that. Also, I had removal of the Radbourne Pavilion concession renovation and the Radbourne Pavilion reception area renovation. And I had also flagged to change the funding source on the Rising Above roof from capital tax to facility renewal. That is all.
So, Councillor Thiessen, can you clarify? I heard you say that there's a few of those that you were looking for more information on. So I'm getting a sense that there's some that you're looking for more information, some that you're looking to have an action coming out.
Yeah, there will be some that have an action. So the emergency fund, I guess I just kind of want to know what the emergency fund is going to be used for and how it's going to be passed out around our facilities. It's $150,000 year over year, and I'm down with that, but I want to make sure we're not generating slush. I just want to know what the condition is the fire hall slab replacement. I'm not opposed to it, but it's a pretty big item in our 2021 budget. And I just want to make sure that it can be saved and or see where council feels about if we should save it. The Rising Above new roof, I guess that's just for council to deliberate, but my intention with that is to change the funding source from capital tax to facility renewal. And then the Old Highway 43 rehab program, just to discuss about crosswalk when we take over the road to the new hospital. The reason why I flagged that one is I have had a couple discussions with some of the construction crew people who are working at the hospital. Currently, over 400 people are working there, and approximately 100 of them don't have vehicles and have to cross the road every single day. So it's becoming, especially in the winter condition, pretty unsafe. I also think about when the hospital is actually open. I want to know what our plans are for sidewalks and crosswalks at that main entrance right off of Highway 43.
Okay. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Given. In addition to some of the ones that Councillor these and highlighted. I also wanted to highlight the box office and lobby, the concession upgrade, and the Rock 97 room at Revolution Place, as well as at the Ernie Radburn Pavilion concession renovation to office space. Sorry, okay. I missed that one, sorry. The reception, was it flagged for the? Okay, I was trying to keep up on them, sorry. And just the leisure center demolition, and maybe I can just ask a question on that now. I don't know if that's possible. I'm just curious, I thought we'd funded this last year. So it's still funded. Is it going to be a 2020 or is it going to be a 2021 item?
Director Glavin?
The exact date would highly correlate with the completion of the new high school, as when the comp is demolished, the intent of administration is to tender it concurrently so that our demolition would occur at the same time as the comp. So this likely isn't a 2020 expense.
Okay, so just for clarification, do we need to make any motions to defer that into future budget years, or is that? Dr.
Glavin?
So I believe this was funded last year, and this is just represented in the 2020 year currently. So it would not result in any additional taxation this year. It's funded from previously levied capital tax.
Thanks.
So is it the case then that would just continue to be reflected until as a funded item, not requiring any additional funding, but that would be a funded item that would carry over year to year until it was completed?
That's correct.
So Councillor Palat, I just want to make sure that I heard them correctly. So the Revolution Place box office, and lobby, was it the concession upgrade or the concession upgrade, and the Rock 97 room? Yep. Concession.
And then a couple further ones under engineering was the snow dumping existing and the traffic control.
Are you looking for more information on those?
Yeah, I guess I would be looking for more information for sure. So,
snow dump existing and traffic control. Okay. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Apologies if I duplicate something. I think I've got it though. I would like to flag playground life cycle replacement program, as well a Heritage Village assessment consultant report, suburban hub transit stations, Montrose Cultural Center energy deficiencies, and Montrose Cultural Center parkade roof repairs. Business applications, inspection programs.
Sure, Councillor Thiessen had that one.
Okay.
Definitely stands out.
And land acquisition. And I think this is different than Councillor Palat's. New snow dump marshalling yard. And patrol vehicle. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. So I just want to make sure, are we okay that we're getting all these items that council is raising? Okay. I'm trying to write them down longhand. You're just doing an asterisk, which is way smarter. I don't see anybody else in the queue. So maybe I would just caucus with the city manager to discuss how we want to approach these items. Everybody back? Well done, everyone. That was a quick return. So just wanted to check. That's a fairly extensive list of items that council members flagged. Some I appreciate we're looking for some information, and some there may be some actions arising. I guess just to put it all into context, our budget approach for this year, council did significant work last year in improving many of these items that were actually just flagged, were approved with significant discussion last year. And so administration had prepared to highlight changes to council's approved capital plan. So they undertook a approach to recommend, to highlight to us any changes, additions or deletions to what council had previously approved. So administration was prepared on that aspect. That's what the slides were there for, and that's the details that admin provided for us. Council did receive the budget package well in advance, and so if there were things that were truly informational in nature, we had an opportunity to ask those questions. I know a number of council members took opportunity to ask those questions by emailing ahead of time, and those questions were circulated back out to all of council. And we had one example of where a director had a heads up about a specific intent of a council member to make a specific change. So recognizing that the capital plan is fully within council's authority to change. I mean, we can change our minds and change our minds back as many times as we wish. And we shouldn't set up our administration to present one set of information and then on the day request a different set of information. Or, well, actually, sorry, we have full authority to do that. We can do whatever we want. But our expectation of the level of detail that they're going to be in a position to provide should match the amount of notice that we give them. So with that, I think my call on this is going to be that we should either be in a position to make motions on these things. If somebody wants to stand up and say, I move that, fill in the blank, that's how we're going to start this. And we'll start now. Council members that flagged an item will be responsible for putting forward a motion to start off the discussion. And I don't think we get to start off now to say, well, before I do anything, I want to know. We had a decent amount of time to ask those questions in advance, so we should have shown up here prepared to make specific motions and to defend them or to debate them with our council colleagues. So that's going to be my call on the way that we handle this process and the flagged items here. Okay, I'm getting some nods, some like, okay, but generally we have to figure out how to manage it, and I think that's the way we'll go. And with that, we'll start. I'm just going to simply start at the start with the first ones that I've got on my list. I'll make sure that I don't miss any over here. And the first up was the Eastlink Center fitness upgrades. Councillor Thiessen.
For sure. Maybe I could defer to Councillor Platt because I know I took this off his list. We just shared though.
Let's start with making motions.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion that we don't fund this to $100,000. We had this conversation again last year, and I believe we defunded this last year as well. Unless I'm mistaken, I thought we had this last year as well.
So actually, Councillor Platt, I'm going to ask you to make a motion.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion that we fund this to $50,000 instead of the $100,000 that's allocated here. The reason I'm going to say that is, again, I spent a lot of time in this facility. I feel like we've got equipment not being utilized in several spots of the facility, and I don't think that us having $50,000 there is going to hurt our ability to keep our operations moving forward. So the motion's to reduce this from 100 to 50.
In the 2020 year.
The 2020 year.
Okay, so Councillor Platt's motion is specific. Eastlink Center equipment update to reduce that amount to $50,000 in 2020. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing none. Councillor Bressie.
Sorry, Mayor Given, could I just have about 30 seconds before you do that?
Yep. It's on this item is on page 16 of the capital package that was handed out to council in advance.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just sorry I wasn't prepared to speak or think or vote on these, so I'm just getting some of my information in a row. And I'm going to be voting against this. My understanding is that last year, again, I wasn't prepared to be voting on these either. I circulated some questions about capital items prior to this, like I thought the process would be. So forgive me if I'm speaking wrong, but taking about 30 seconds, just looking really quickly at minutes of last year and last year's proposed capital plan, I think what happened was this was proposed to be $100,000 last year, and council made a motion to reduce it was supposed to be $200,000. There was a successful motion to reduce it to $100,000, which is now reflected in the capital plan. So just pointing out to council that this is already half of what originally got introduced for us. Also, my recollection is that some of this replacement was addressing safety concerns with equipment as it came to end of life, and it's one of those things where I'm kind of hesitant to see that equipment replaced. As I shared earlier, I really think we need to do a revamp of what the Eastlink Center is and what we're hoping to get out of it long term. In the absence of that, I think that if we didn't do our work to come into today prepared to have good information about what things are, my default has to be that I'm going to back what's already in the capital plan, especially reflecting that it's already half of what the administration originally suggested, thanks to an action of council last term. So I'll be voting no.
Thanks, Councillor Russi. Councillor Clayton.
Not on this.
Okay. Do you have something from the director?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I just wanted to share some information. Most of our equipment is the original equipment that we from 2011, and in speaking to the general manager recently, the money that we had allocated for 2019, we just ordered the equipment. It's due to arrive very soon, and they're very excited about having the new piece, like the new technology in the community as well. There's several other gyms that have come up or opened up this current year. So in her opinion, it's very important that we remain current with equipment, and equipment's very expensive these days. So 100,000 buys us some equipment, but it's not extensive for commercial use. We average about 17,000 visits per month in the gym, is what information she provided. So it's heavy use as well.
Okay. Thanks, Director Miller. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so I'll go back to Councillor Palat to close.
I just want to ask administration on that then. Are we already contractually obligated to this $100,000?
Director Miller?
Thanks, Mayor. Given not for the 20,000 or not 2020 funding, it would be another RFP process.
Okay.
Councillor Platt?
I'm still going to be confident that I think we should be looking at reducing this to 50,000. And for me, a big reason why is I appreciate we're in the gym space, and I think it's great that we have the Eastlink Center. I still think there's I go there regularly. I've said that enough today, I guess, probably, but I've never seen all the equipment in there full. And so I've also been members in other gyms, and I was almost owner of a gym at one point where you talked about maybe you just get rid of equipment at some point as life cycles change. I want to remind everybody that we're also competing with people that have memberships of gyms at $10 a month. So we're not even in the competitive market as far as rates on this one. So agreeing with Councillor Bressi, I'm looking forward to a conversation about what Eastlinks looks like moving forward. I'm not fully in support at some point of us needing to be 100% in the gym space. I think there's a lot of people in the community doing that. I think there's a lot of big boxes open that can be converted into that, and there's people looking at those, hopefully. So I'm not convinced we need to keep putting money back into fitness equipment. So that's why I'll be hoping you guys support the reduction of $50,000.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Platt. So I'll call for the vote on Councillor Platt's motion to reduce the Eastlink Center fitness equipment upgrades to $50,000 in 2020. Please vote. I'm looking for one more, Council. Just make sure your vote stuck. Everybody show that their vote is in. Okay, no, mine. I've only got 7 casts, so I'm going to cancel that vote. Well, please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. Okay, we'll move on to Eastlink Center Pool Sanitation. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Given I brought this up, I didn't really feel like I had questions about it, but I'm sure questions will pop up. This is an item that keeps coming up. We started with one system, and then we changed over to another system because it was better, more efficient, less chemically and caustic. Switched over to another system. Now we're switching over to another system. So I just think it's a repetitive spending of money. So unless there's information from administration that says that this equipment is falling apart, I don't know why we need to continue to replace this system. So I move to unfund it.
Okay. Councillor Thiessen's motion is to unfund the $200,000 in capital tax for pool sanitation replacement. Open for discussion and debate. I will say that I do remember this discussion from last year. At least a part of it was moving to a different system that was both safer for employees and more effective. I would say that pool sanitation is one of the core functions. When you think about core responsibilities of the municipality and advice, technical advice that administration should be giving us, how to keep water clean is one of those really basic things that I would suggest that I would defer to their advice on. I think there's things that we can have political opinions about, and the best way to keep water clean in a swimming pool is probably not a thing that we have earned an opinion on. I certainly don't feel that I have. So I won't support the motion. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Gunn. I remember this conversation last year, and I guess my confusion is if this is about keeping water clean, isn't that an operational issue? I'm not sure why this keeps coming back as capital. If this is a function of the Eastlink Center operating, I would think it should be an operation and not come up as a capital.
This is a capital upgrade. There's physical improvements that need to be made to make improvements to the sanitation system.
Okay, and maybe I need to be recalled. I thought we funded that last year, and I think that's what Councillor Thiessen's point is. We did fund this last year. Did we not fund it? Sorry.
Director Miller, or this, and this may be an example of where council will remember where we had extensive discussion and debate on the 2020 capital plan last year. And so it's possible that we're feeling like this because we're retreading things that we did actually discuss and debate last time around and came to a conclusion on. And now we're retreading them. Director Walker, I think I saw you moving towards your microphone.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. That is precisely what we did last year. We discussed the 4-year capital plan last year, and we provided all the information about all of the capital projects that council approved. And so, yes, some of them were funded for 2019, some of them were in 2020, and so on, up to 2023. So we are talking about them again now as flagged items. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Let's see, Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I just trying to reflect on my memory, but I believe after your comment about it's been replaced several times, and I did go back to Eastlink staff after last budget process, and they said that's incorrect. It really hasn't been. So maybe there were some modifications to it, but it wasn't a full system replacement. And I recall talking to Megan Minette, and she was quite insistent that we should be replacing the system with what's recommended here. So just for better water quality and ease of use as well. But I searched for an email, but I can't find the email with more specific details. So.
Okay. Thanks, Director Miller. I see Councillor O'Toole.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Given. I remember when we did the old pool, we had chlorine, we had salt water, and then we had some issues with that. This, when we talked about it last year, was a better opportunity for staff to do it in a safer manner. And we were able to buy the product cheaper than we would be using. And that's what I recall. So it's going to be a cost savings plus safer for the staff to do it without having to get into a whole bunch of safety equipment to put on. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Then go to Councillor Thiessen to close.
Yeah, maybe I'm just stubborn, or maybe I'm just gonna stick to my line. This is a system that whether we're constantly upgrading or moving forward, it seems like every time we have a new manager at the Eastlink Center, I know this is brought up not by our current manager but our previous one, that this is the way to go, and a new system is introduced. I just it's $200,000 almost every other year that keeps coming up, and I'm talking about my experience on a previous council. So in saying that, I'm going to stick to my stubbornness. I'm going to still vote. Please vote with your conscience. This is public safety, and I do trust our administration, but sometimes I think we just switch things over for the sake of switching things over, and that's where my memory is going with this.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I'll call for the vote on reducing the Eastlink Center pool sanitation upgrade by $200,000. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does not carry. The next one up was the South Bear Creek off-leash dog park expansion.
Yep.
I'm going in order of the list that I took from the council members. So, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much. I would just make a quick motion to not fund the South Bear Creek off-leash dog park expansion. I know that we've had this discussion lots of times, but this has been defeated by previous councils, and I don't know if it's the best use of land or if it's even a needed use of land. We have other dog parks in and around the area. We have lots of trails where people can walk their dogs on leash. It's a $45,000 encroachment into the river valley based off of maybe my foggy memory, but I just think it's I think the dog park is well used, but it's never overcrowded, and I don't know why we need to expand this. It just seems to be something that's repetitively requested, and I just would request council take it off the budget altogether.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Thiessen, to remove the $45,000 of capital tax funding for South Bear Creek off-leash dog park. I'll recognize the Director of Community Services.
Thanks, Mayor Given. This is one I do have information from last year on as well. So the comments we provided last year is it's hugely popular and well used. We do have drainage issues. Right now there's an area where the water pools, and then the dogs still use that area, so then it's contaminated water. And then there's also discussion about removal of the model race car track would mitigate the drainage issue. And I think that facility is not well used. It's underutilized. And it's a very small organization, and my recollection was there was some discussions with them about that, and it wasn't a big impact. And then it's also a month-to-month lease since early 2017 is information we shared, and the group is well aware of the desire to utilize the site for the dog park expansion. And then it would also allow, an expansion would allow use by smaller animals, smaller dogs as well. And currently it's mostly for large dogs.
Okay, thanks very much, Director Miller. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm on the next item already.
Okay, so let's make sure that we get votes in and then ring in after we conclude a vote and we see that big screen flash up with who was where. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'm going to support this. Sorry, I will not support the motion to not fund it. This particular dog park is a very well utilized one. I think it was our first one in Grande Prairie, and right since the beginning it's had that stinky cesspool drainage problem, and it's a wonderful place for folks to go off leash, but that is really off-putting and in fact really disgusting. The whole little trail through the trees there, that I think it's well worthwhile to have this one, which is on our south side, and our original one refurbished a little bit and embiggened. Enlarged. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Bressie.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Given. A question before I make my comment for administration is this has $45,000 capital tax, also $45,000 non-government sources. Could you refresh my memory what those non-government sources are?
Mr. Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think it's either, I think it's sponsorship or fundraising by the group.
Okay.
So sorry, there's a group attached to this park that's committed to doing that fundraising, or is it fundraising that's already there, or is it fundraising that we'd commit to doing before we built it?
Okay. Director Miller?
Just some clarity on that. I think it's through marketing options, so sponsorship, so recognition at the site, and then donations made to help us with it.
So administration is proposing?
Yes.
Administration is proposing, rather than doing it fully from capital tax, to have at least a portion of the cost of the project come from sponsorship and advertising. Okay.
Great. Well, and I'll be voting against this motion. I drive past that. I've never used it, but I drive past that dog park several times a week throughout the summer, and even just driving past, it's so obvious that it needs work and that it needs to be bigger. Even never setting foot in there, I can tell you that there's a clear need that I see several times a week. So I'll be voting against this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Given. I'll be voting against this too, and I'm looking forward to seeing a small dog park as well as the large dog park. I've seen situations where dogs have attacked the smaller ones, caused physical damage to the dogs, and as well as the owner of the dog. And it's about time. We've delayed this enough, and I think we need to make this happen. So Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Councillor O'Toole. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Then I would go to Councillor Thiessen to close. No need to close? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Please vote on Councillor Thiessen's motion to delete $45,000 in capital tax from the off-leash dog park program for 2020. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does not carry. The next one up was the Eastlink Center Flow Rider.
Nope. Sorry, I went backwards and forwards. I'll actually just make a motion here because this one got super circled and it's going down the list. I would move that council remove the Ernie Radburn Pavilion concession renovation to office space and the Ernie Radburn Pavilion reception area renovation. Those are two items. Speaking to these items, I've seen the reception area in the back many times. I've been pretty intimate helping with events and as a volunteer and otherwise. There's plenty of space back there for two people. It's not necessarily, I would say, an improved safety concern by renovating it. I think it's a pretty good chunk of change that we're investing into that. It's a nice space. And on the other part of it, the Ernie Radburn Pavilion concession renovation to office space, I don't know about the rest of council, but my ideal central pavilion for our jewel park, Muskosipi Park, isn't filled and contained with office space. It's filled with space where people can gather, hang out, stay warm, lace up skates, change their clothes, do whatever. I don't want to turn like 2/3 of this into office spaces. And I also very strongly have reservations about our ability to be able to make this conversion from concession to office space for $70,000 or less. So for all those reasons, I'm asking council to please support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So your motion is reflective of those two items, deleting $70,000 in 2020 for the concession renovation and $150,000 for the reception area renovation. Is that correct? Okay, so there's two items there. Councillor Bressie?
Thank you, Mayor Given. Can we split these?
Yeah, of course we can split them. So we'll deal first with the concession renovation. Open for discussion and debate on the concession renovation. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you, Mayor Given. I'm going to be voting against this motion. It's on a face, I tend to agree with you, but I think in 8 years of living here in Grande Prairie, I actually don't remember a single time that I've ever purchased anything from that concession. I don't remember it being integral to events, and I'm a guy that spent a lot of time in that building, both with my kids, going to other community events, and also running my own events out of that building. So I think it's underutilized space right now, and yeah, so I'll be voting against it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Just a question for administration. I guess on the $70,000 renovation, what are we hoping to accomplish with that?
Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. In speaking to Karen McGriskin in the past, it was just to remove the kitchen equipment and create office space. And some of the office space that she was talking about was for staff. Right now, I think one of the staff members sits around the corner in the back, and potentially we could move that person up front, which would be, they'd have a better view of what's going on in the facility as well. And then she also did mention the potential for rental space.
So I'll be saying I'll be supporting Councillor Thiessen's motion. I'd love to have a conversation about the whole pavilion and how that could look in the future moving forward. But I don't think that's a conversation for today. So for now, I will be supporting Councillor Thiessen's motion, hoping we'll defeat this so we can have a conversation about what that facility could look like in the future on a holistic overall picture, not just piece by piece.
Thanks very much, Councillor Platt. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I too will be supporting the motion. I can appreciate that there may be a need for equipment upgrades. There may need to be changes in the existing concession area for it to be more efficient and more effective. However, once it's gone, we'll never get it back. So if you're gonna cover up holes where there was gas fittings and plumbing, etc., to make offices, it'll never go back to a concession. And you may not have used it, Councillor Bressie, but I've been there many times in the winter skating. People are buying hot chocolate. There's food happening in the summers, and it may be not utilized to its full potential. I absolutely agree, but I think that if we take it away, we'll never get it back. So I will support Councillor Thiessen's motion.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. I don't see anybody else in the queue. go to Councillor Thiessen to close.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, and thank you everyone for listening in on this. I agree with Councillor Palat. We've had conversations during this budget process, not to part and parcel our buildings. If we really want to create a pavilion that the community can go to and enjoy, let's do it all together. In fact, we'll probably save costs on the whole vision of the pavilion rather than doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and then change it all over again in 5-10 years when we need to update the rest of the building. I'm just saying that we're in different fiscal times right now, and I understand that, which is why I'm making this motion. It's not an easy one to make, but it's one that I think council and administration need to work together to figure out what that vision is going to be for the pavilion, and get the use that we're getting out of it right now without having to spend extra dollars. It's not necessary expense. So I'd say please support this and remove this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. The next one is they were split, the Ernie Radburn Pavilion reception area renovation. Discussion debate on that motion. This would be to reduce by $150,000 that item. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. Okay, the next item then, on the order that I had them, the order that I heard you say them, Councillor Thiessen, was East Link Center Flow Rider.
Yeah, for sure. And to expedite the process a little bit, some of these will require questions, so I can actually take them off my list. I did have direct funds. So in regards to the East Link Center Flow Rider, I'm pretty sure I know where that's going to go, so I'm not going to make any motions on that. The East Link Center tunnel repair, though, is the next item that I'm still curious. I had the same questions last year, and they're still reflected in the same way this year. We've had over a year to discover what our non-government sources are and our other revenue. So I have here my budget package, and I apologize to administration because I didn't bring it forward before, but that's $245,000 of non-government sources and other revenue. So have we identified the non-government sources or the other revenue to this? I understand it needs to get done, but
Councillor Thiessen, is there a motion? So I'm sorry, I am putting everybody on the spot to say if we flagged it, we need to be in a position to make a motion because we previously had an opportunity to ask questions.
Definitely. I'll make the motion then. Here's my motion is to defer funding of the ELC tunnel repair to the 2021 budget and to provide, I guess, in future, before we entertain any action, the non-government sources and other revenue generation.
Did you get all that, Val?
Very simply, just move it to next year, 2021.
Yep, that's a good way to make the motion. Okay, I see the Corporate Services Director.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. I was actually going to talk about the flow rider pump, but
that one's been withdrawn.
That's been withdrawn, and the tunnel repair. I believe Director Miller is going to speak to that one.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. So the information I have here from last year, the original request was $300,000 in 2019. And it was to reallocate $135,000 of existing sponsorship revenue. And I know there was a pot of money from the agreement between the school districts and the city that's been set aside for situations like this, I believe. And then the remaining $165,000 would be cost shared between the city and the public and Catholic school districts. And I know that has been discussed in the scores meetings as well with both districts. So it'd be $55,000 each from the city and the school districts. And the reason why we're seeking this remedy, I guess, is in the spring and during heavy rainfall, we still continue to get extensive leaking through the walls and the ceiling as well. And our thought over time is this will create bigger issues if we don't address it.
So, Director Miller, just to clarify what you said, so the 55,000 is the city's portion in a one-third partnership. The other 2/3 are reflected in the 110,000. I'm just doing the rough math
of the 165, correct?
And then the other revenue was coming from a reserve fund or a.
It's yes, it's somewhat of a reserve fund or sponsorship fund. I guess Susan could clarify the exact terminal. Sponsorship.
Okay, so the funding is in place. So that's the details of the funding and where it's coming from.
Yes.
So the funding's in place. Very good. I will move to withdraw my motion then. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Thiessen withdraws his motion.
And just to expedite even further, I know I had other questions, but I'm just going to make one final motion, and anything that says Chris on it, I'm sure I can bring to future committee meetings. But just in regards to the rising above new roof, I would move that we change to amend the funding source to reflect the facility renewal reserve and not capital tax.
Okay, so Councillor Thiessen's motion is to change the funding source of that project, not to change the amount, but the funding source. Open for discussion, debate, questions, or comments. I guess my question would be, why was administration recommending this funding source rather than some other funding source? It is currently recognized as capital tax rather than facility renewal. And so my question would be, before I go and change administration's recommendation, I might like to understand why they recommended that.
Thank you, Mayor Given. So my guess is that we had tapped out the facility renewal funding at the end by the end of the 2023 year. And so we selected the capital tax funding source.
So by the end of the 2023 year, there may not be capital tax available to do this. And so a change in the funding source of this to facility renewal would mean that other things would have to end up being capital tax rather than facility renewals.
That's correct. So we haven't quite fleshed out the process for funding. Typically what we do is we fund our capital plan over a 4-year cycle. So every year we have a new 4-year cycle. So in fact, to the end of 2024, our facility renewal reserve does have funds in it. However, that's based on council approving our total plan. And funding for this project would appropriately be, I agree, facility renewal funds. But we knew that we had capacity under capital tax, so that's where we funded it from.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, I won't support the motion. I think it's possible that some council members might be looking at capital tax as a way to impact the tax rate. I'm not sure that it does what we think it does in that case. If we're saying we don't need to do this project, then that's one thing. But I don't support the motion on the basis of changing the funding source. Again, that scenario where I would take administration's recommendation because they have that whole of budget view of how each one of the different reserves are being used and how capital tax is being used and how that impacts our property tax rate. So I won't support the motion on that basis. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Goodwin. Just a question then for administration. How does the facility renewal fund get topped up? How does funds go back into it?
Dr. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor Given. So every year we take the value of our buildings and we allocate 2% of the value of that building and we put that in the facility renewal reserve. And out of that reserve, we pay for all of the facility renewal items that come forward, as well as capital projects related to facilities.
So can you give me kind of an idea, a rough number of what would that 2% look like on a budget? And where would that be in an operating? Would that be under facilities or operating or?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get that number from our finance folk. So this year we had 3.5 million transferred to the facility renewal reserve.
And just so I can fully understand this, where does that show up within our budget? Like, where was does the $3.5 million come out of facilities under operating, or where does the $3.5 million come from?
So you will see that expenditure recognized in fiscal services and then transferred to a reserve, and then it comes back in as facility renewal funding as well as capital plan funding.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Thiessen's motion to change the funding source here? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'd really implore Council to vote against this for two reasons. One is what I heard is a really important priority in this budget that administration expressed is increasing our capital tax, where we've underfunded capital tax in past years. And the problem with that isn't just that it creates issues funding projects now. Even more concerning is funding projects in 2, 5, however long years. I think for me, it's really important that a higher proportion of the taxes we collect goes to capital projects and for basic maintenance, and I think that's important. It's also what I heard as a priority of administration, and I support that. The other reason is that as we know, we're working on a facilities condition index report, and we're working on a longer term strategy, and that'll govern how this reserve gets used in the future and make sure that we've got a really sound policy for funding it and a plan for spending it. I think in the absence of that report, I'm very hesitant to take money out of it that's not recommended by administration. So I hope that Council votes against this motion.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bressie. I don't see anybody else in the queue. We'll go to Councillor Thiessen to close.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I actually don't see this as a reckless move. I see this as a move that we're talking about our 2023 budget reserves, and it's a $281,000 ask. This is the same treatment that we're going to do for the drainage at the Center for Creative Arts that we've used for a roof replacement at Center 2000 in the past. Like this is a part of what we do. I'm not suggesting that administration did something wrong here. I'm just suggesting that as far as capital tax goes, even if we redirect our capital tax somewhere else, or we take a portion of that and we redirect it somewhere else, it's only a $280,000 line when we're dealing with a $190 million business as a corporation here. I fully respect administration's desires to stock up our reserves, and I believe that's a fair assessment. But I think for something like this, it's $281,000 in the grand scheme of things, capital tax or otherwise. It's still coming cash in and out of the city of Grande Prairie, and we're spending that money. So right now we're in a different fiscal situation, and we've had that discussion with our operations and with our capital. We have an opportunity as well to help do a little bit of easing into the next years, and then we have future years to build up those reserve stocks and build up our capital asks and our capital purchases as well. So for right now, I don't see this as anything that is out of line with proper budgeting or whatnot. And if it is a hiccup, it's something that I think we can easily remedy. So I would just ask and request you to support this.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I'll call for the vote on Councillor Thiessen's motion to change the funding source on this item. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does not carry. Okay, our next item. Then Councillor Thiessen removed a number that he identified as things that would be informational in nature, and he'd be willing to bring forward to committee or to administration for requests. I think that takes us to Councillor Palat's items that he raised with respect to the Revolution Place box office and concession. I think maybe two different items, but Councillor Palat, if you want to start with your motion.
Sorry, I'd like a little bit of clarification from administration before I make a motion, please.
So I'm going to say something that's going to sound really snotty. So it is later in the day. So that's why we had a week at least to be able to ask those questions and a deadline for council to ask those questions.
Fair enough. Well, then I'm going to...
Now I feel better that I said it. So.
Fair enough. Then I'm going to make a motion that we don't fund any of these items because I don't feel like I have enough information, and apparently I didn't put my requests in, which is my own fault. But having said that, I'm going to start off with the Rock 97 room, and I'm going to say we don't fund this. My reason for that is as much as I can appreciate this may help the storm, and I'm sure when I go to my next storm board meeting, I'll get beat up there. But I don't know what other value this adds to our facility. It doesn't help concerts. It doesn't help the venue in that way. And $75,000 to renovate a pretty small room that doesn't get a lot of utilization does not feel like a good use at this point. I would look at this down the road with more conversation about it and maybe more input. But today I don't feel comfortable supporting $75,000 to renovate a small room that gets very little utilization.
Thanks for that, Councillor Platt, and thanks for your graciousness in accepting my my comment. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I also I will support this motion. I believe that the Rock 97 room is a nice to have. With a renovation, this room is utilized for VIP hospitality events, and it's truly just a room with carpet and chairs and tables. To have an upgrade would be nice to have, but it's not needed. There are other amenities that do need upgrading and improvement in that facility. This one is something that could be looked at further down the road. So I encourage council to support the motion.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clayton. I'd recognize the Director for the Service Area, Mr. Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. If I can provide information on the concession, the box office, and lobby, and Rock 97 as well.
Let's start with Rock 97. That's the motion that we're on right now.
Okay. So the vision from the general manager is to create a premium event space for the facility. The patio would be a reconfiguration of underutilized space in the arena's northwest corner, which is where the room is located, and to create a fun, energized premium space for both events and daily meeting rentals. And he anticipates he could generate new revenue, and it would greatly assist in moving Revolution's Place ability to compete with industry competitors. So,
and thanks for that. Any discussion or debate on Councillor Palat's motion? Seeing none, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. Councillor Palat, your next one.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I'm having a little bit of a hard time with the box office and lobby renovation for $150,000. And the reason is back to some of the other conversations I've had today. I wish we'd have a conversation about what the Revolution Place's future looks like before we start gutting this piece by piece, similar to what we talked about with the Ernie Radburn Pavilion a minute ago. So I'm going to make a motion that we don't fund this $150,000. It's not something I'm liking. I wish we could have something happen there, but I don't think this gets to the root of the problems of what Revolution Place is having. So I think putting this $150,000 in now is a Band-Aid, and I would hope that we support that for now. But I will be looking at making a subsequent motion at the end of capital.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Platt. Open for discussion debate. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. As with the last motion, I will support this motion. The box office upgrades and lobbies. I understand that in the box office, the staff are not in an ideal work situation. There are people sharing offices. However, as of today, we unfunded one position. There will be more space in the office. I don't think that this is an improvement that needs to happen this year. And again, when we get to other items that we are able to add, I will be adding an item that I think is of more urgent need than any of these. So I encourage council to not fund it, so therefore to support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. Any other discussion or debate? Director Miller, you said you did have information on all these items. Do you want to provide that on the box office and lobby?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. So from the general manager previously, it was the upgrades would be to correct event day traffic flow issues, which would be improvements for the guest experience, speed and quality of service delivery as well. And currently our box office isn't accessible to mobility impaired customers, so the reconfiguration would also address that accessibility issue. And like Councillor Clayton mentioned, it is very jammed in there right now, and I know with one less position it could make a difference, but that'll help in the future, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or debate before I go to Councillor Palat to close? Councillor Bressy. Sorry, Councillor Bressy, just turn your mic on. I skipped through too quick.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. Just a question for Director Miller. My ears always pop up when you talk about accessibility challenges. I'm just curious, is that accessibility issues for employees or for patrons? And also, are we in contravention of any legislation about accessible workplaces or anything like that? So, 2 questions. Does this accessibility issues affect patrons? And 2, are we meeting our legislated obligations to employees with what's currently there.
Mr. Miller?
Thanks, Mayor Given. So I believe it's for patrons to have a lower window. And sorry, the second question was to...
Are we meeting legislated requirements?
Yeah, like is there
You know of
issues with
any?
employees getting there that might get us in trouble with workplace laws? I don't understand all that stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to provide a 100% accurate comment on that. I'm sorry. But,
Okay. Councillor, don't see anybody in the queue. Then I would go to Councillor Palat to close.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I wasn't, I can appreciate the information about the accessibility, so I'm going to amend my own motion. Instead of it being $150,000 for that I was wanting to defund, I'm going to ask to defund it by $125,000, leaving $25,000 there for them to be able to address an accessibility window, which I think is more than enough, but I don't want to split hairs over the amounts, and I appreciate that if it's not that much, it'll come back into our general amounts anyways. And I think that way we can still meet the intent of what, if it's an accessibility issue, I certainly don't want to stand in front of that, but I don't think other than that, this is going to be a major change to our facility. And I think that's $125,000 that we can put back in this facility at a later time with a better purpose.
Okay, so Councillor Palat, you've changed your motion to be $125,000 reduction rather than $150,000 reduction. Yep. Okay. Any discussion, debate on Councillor Palat's amended motion? I will say that I would prefer actually to not do anything rather than to judge here today that we know exactly how much it would cost to do that kind of construction. Appreciating that Councillor Palat's probably the most informed out of any of us here, but I would rather just not do the project than to say, well, we'll give you $25,000 and see what you can do with that. So I won't be able to support even the amended motion. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. Okay, our next one, let's see, concession upgrade. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm going to withdraw any comment on this because I didn't ask in advance and I don't have enough information to make a motion on this one.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Platt. I appreciate that. Next, I think we had there were a couple around snow dump. Snow dump existing was the next one that I see on my list, and it's possible there might have been something else. But snow dump existing, was that yours, Councillor Platt, or was that Councillor Clayton? I think that was Councillor Platt. Yeah, Councillor Platt.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I guess I'm struggling with what the $100,000 would be for this, and again, because I didn't ask information on it.
Sure. Director Lavin.
Thank you, Mayor Given. This is to repair the clay liner of the existing snow dump to meet regulatory requirements.
Okay. Thank you.
Then the next one I had was traffic control. I think that was Councillor Platt as well.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think with this one, we have it as a standing item, and I can appreciate that, but I think we have a decent amount of money in this fund that's been built up over time. And I don't know if we have unless I'm mistaken, we have a fund that we put into every year. And so this is to replace lights. And I'm not aware of a bunch of light replacements that happened the last few years. So I'm just wondering why we just keep dumping $600,000 into this.
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Goon. I'm waiting for what the balance of the account is, but my understanding is that we have had a capital program that has utilized these funds every year. I believe we had a number of replacements and repairs happening last week, specifically throughout town.
I would observe that it doesn't actually say traffic lights. It says traffic control, which I think takes a number of different forms, including potentially geometric upgrades or other things. I would be curious if that was a part of it because there are more ongoing items there. So again, this is a situation where maybe not enough information at hand right now to be able to make a decision on it. Councillor Plott, what's your wish here? You raised the issue.
I guess for now, what I'll do is this sounds like it's more of a committee conversation, so I'll just leave it for a committee for a future date.
Okay, thank you. Councillor I think that was the end of the items that you'd highlighted, Councillor Platt. Yeah. Councillor Clayton, I saw that you had raised the playground renewal, life cycle replacement.
Mayor, given if possible, before that, I'd like to go to the concession upgrade because I would have flagged it if Councillor Plott hadn't. So I would move that that council unfund the capital tax. I would move that council move the capital tax funding of $50,000 to 2021. And saying that motion, I think that there are other necessities that are needed right now in that facility. There aren't a lot of events that are necessarily happening in that facility where the kitchen is utilized as much as it has been in the past. The facility seems to be more concert driven lately than gala type events. The gala type events seem to have moved to another facility, and these concession upgrades were going to be a nice to have when we were doing a lot of food service out of there. And for us to spend $50,000 to upgrade a kitchen for a private vendor to be more efficient, I don't really think is our responsibility. I would like more information on that as we go into the next year. However, I don't think it's necessary for 2020, and I would encourage council to support the motion to move the funding to 2021. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So Councillor Clayton has a specific motion to move that funding to 2021. I'll recognize the Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. If I can share the information from last time as well. So right now, the original points of sale were designed in 1994, and the GM feels it's overdue for modernizing, which I think it does look dated. The funding, or sorry, so it's a total of 155,000 that we did ask for. It was 30,000 in 2019, 50,000 in 2020, and another 75 in 2021. And the plan was that the upgrades would allow for a quicker service, a greater flow, a cleaner, more modern aesthetic look, and branding as well. So the plan was to upgrade the center ice concession first in 2019. That hasn't happened yet, and then followed by the lobby concession in 2020 and the east concession in 2021. And we do get considerable revenue from Crystal Catering, and his thought was these upgrades would also enhance the monies that we would receive in revenue.
Director Miller, Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm just curious, Director Miller, with Crystal Catering's contract, we just renewed that. Was this something that we'd agree to do with him when we renewed this, or with our organization?
Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I wouldn't be able to confirm, but I would suspect that conversation probably did take place, that there was a plan to do upgrades. But unfortunately, the general manager is not available today, so I wouldn't be able to confirm, but I would suspect he had the conversation.
Okay. And maybe make an assumption here, so if I am, please correct me on that, but I think we're under a percentage of sales at some point. So we've done a business case on whether this investment would actually yield any return on a percentage of return or percentage of the sales, potential percentage of sales that may increase.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm not aware of a business case. I think it's his opinion that this would further enhance the revenue for the city.
Okay. Any other discussion or debate on Councillor Clayton's motion to move this forward to 2021? I don't see anybody in the queue. Councillor Clayton, do you wish to close? Okay. Then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry. Then let's go back to the top of that list with the playground life cycle replacement.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that that council modify the budget amounts going forward from 2021 to reflect the same number as 2020, therefore adjusting all of the amounts across the board to $200,000.
Okay, so you're talking about future capital budget years rather than this capital budget year. Okay, so the motion is to reflect $200,000 from 2021 to 2024. Any discussion or debate on that motion? Councillor O'Toole.
This is replacement, and I was wondering how much $200,000 would do when it comes to replacement versus the 450. Just a question if that could be
Director Miller, do you have a sense of that?
Well, I can provide some comments, Mayor Given. I know playgrounds are very expensive, so it would, I guess, our ability would be cut in half by reducing the number for future. But I know we have had some discussions with the parks staff in the past about kind of right-sizing the number of playgrounds we do have throughout the community. And there was a playground survey as well that we're still analyzing the results from that. So that's why it was reduced for 2020 from the original ask as well, I believe. I think originally we asked for 450,000 for each year, and then the request was reduced to give us time to assess. I guess reduced by council, but we were, I think, in support of that to give us time to assess it as well.
Okay, I don't see anybody else in the queue. Then I'll go to Councillor Clayton to close.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the comments from administration. As they mentioned, they are in support of this. Just a little bit of overview for the reason for this. Having been on boards that have raised money at school playgrounds, a couple $100,000 is a decent amount in a playground. The schools are doing great jobs, regardless of the fact that it may or may not be their people's desire for it to be their responsibility. It's the reality of how it is now. Schools are placing playgrounds in neighborhoods, and for $200,000 going forward, I think it's a reasonable expectation of what we can contribute in neighborhoods, etc. So I encourage council to support this.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. That was our close. I'll call for the vote on Councillor Clayton's motion to reflect $200,000 to continue through the capital budget in successive years for the replacement program. Please vote. That motion does carry. Councillor Clayton. No, I thought you had a list.
I have next
Heritage
in order
Village.
Heritage Village assessment. Yeah. So I'm prepared at this time to withdraw that one.
Okay, thank you. Then the next one was suburban transit.
Yes. I apologize for missing the deadline, and I don't have enough information on this one, so I guess I'll have to leave it.
Okay. Next one was Montrose Cultural Center.
This is a question, and won't be a motion, but I'm looking for administration's input in regards to engineering deficiencies were dealt with last term as well as this term, and I'm wondering, is this finally it? By next year, it's forecasted we're going to spend over $2 million on engineering deficiencies. This building has been a sinking money pit, and if we're spending this money of $375,000 this year, and it's recommended over $2 million next year, is there any foreseeable other changes that need to be aware of that should be included in the capital plan? Thank you.
See, Director Miller was already in the queue. I'm prepared to speak to this item. Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. Actually, I was going to speak to the transit station suburban hub, and I was going to help out Councillor Clayton on that one.
Okay, but so the question was, does administration have at this time, or would administration be able to provide information on the extent of this? What's administration's intention around the maintenance of this? Director Walker.
Thank you, Mayor Given. So MCC engineering deficiencies are the result of the mechanical deficiencies of the original construction, and there were significant deficiencies that first facility management tried to address with that contractor. Those attempts have failed, but there are still significant mechanical deficiencies that need to be addressed. So that's why you see these items in the budget.
Councillor Clayton, any?
Apologies, I don't have a motion on that. I do have another motion. I would move that council unfund suburban hub transit stations to the tune of $125,000. If the motion allows me to get more information, then so be it. However, if it's what I think it is, I will strongly oppose this initiative. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. So I'd look to see the Community Services Director was prepared to speak to this last time and got waved off, and so he's probably chomping at the bit now to get in. Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I'm just trying to get get back on track here. So with the suburban hub transit stations, I have had a recent conversation with Mr. Harvard, and with the changes to transit, we don't feel there's a need, so it can actually be removed. So yes, so thanks for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
So Councillor Clayton has a motion to remove that amount from the budget. Is there any other discussion or debate on that motion? Sorry, Councillor Platt, discussion on that? You'll just have to get your microphone.
Thanks, Mayor. Given, I'm just kind of curious, and if that's unfunded, what happens with the $250,000 that was other provincial grants? Would that get reallocated somewhere else, or is that just for another day?
I think we could apply to get it repurposed, but I haven't had that discussion with Mr. Harvard. So my understanding is we have those funds, and so we'll decide what to do with them in the future. I think we'd have to get approval to repurpose them elsewhere, because I'm sure when we applied for them, it was for a transit hub.
So I guess my question is, I'm wondering, within our current budget, is there anywhere that could be allocated to where we're already putting something to capital tax?
Director Miller?
Sorry, the question was if they could be reallocated within the transit department?
Well, I'm not sure what the parameters are when we receive that, so I'm assuming we have to stay within those parameters. I'm just wondering, within this budget cycle, if that's something that we could be repurposing to a capital tax item.
Well, through the mayor, that would be a discussion I'd have to have. I'm sure they're purposed for transit projects only, so I don't know if, with the changes we're making with transit right now, I don't know if there would be another purpose for it.
So will it be able to have the ability to roll forward to a future year then?
No. It's
green trip funding?
I think it's green trip funding, but I know in the past you're able to extend the timeline for retaining the funds, but the corporate services director is saying I'm wrong. So.
Okay, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given. Just a curiosity of these suburban hub transit stations, where were their proposed locations?
I'm just going by memory, but sorry, through the mayor, I think it was the downtown by the town center. I know that I think it was in part of the transit master plan, there was a potential to have a greater hub downtown. So, but I could get clarity on that as well.
It sounds like we're just pulling it out. So yeah, that's fine.
I don't see any other discussion or debate on that motion. I will call for the vote then. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does carry.
Mayor Given, I think my next one is business applications, which I will withdraw. I was able to get information on that, as well on inspection programs. I got the information I required on that. The next motion I'm prepared to make is that the land acquisition, I would move that council unfund the land acquisition of $1 million for the 2020 budget.
Thanks very much. That motion is specific. So motion to delete $1 million from the 2020 budget towards land acquisition. Open for discussion and debate. And first I'll recognize the Infrastructure and Economic Development Director, Dr. Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. This money is allocated, or what we would be intending to use this money for, is for road and stormwater projects. So if there's any projects that we don't have sufficient right-of-way in order to complete the project, we'd have to allocate it through this means. This does not give us, it's not funded through capital tax, it would be through a debenture, and any debentures are still need a borrowing bylaw from council, and any land acquisitions above $100,000 still need council approval. So regardless of how this goes forward, council will see this at least one more time before the money is actioned.
Thanks very much. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. And I appreciate that, and I was kind of assuming that was a process. I'm just kind of curious if we have an idea of currently for 2020 what we'd be looking at for land acquisitions for right-of-ways.
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. We have a number of pieces of land that we've identified. Some are for projects in 2020, some are projects that we can't fund until we acquire the land, so it will come in future cycles. And they are across the city in a number of areas of different sizes.
And just maybe more of a question for administration on this is if this is something that's going, is this not something we could have as a capital tax item instead of it being a general debenture item?
Dr. Glavin?
This is something that, yes, theoretically we could do using that. It kind of goes in fits and starts with land acquisition. There's some pieces we've been trying to get for a number of years, and we haven't been successful. And had we proposed putting all of this into capital tax, we'd be sitting on a lot of taxpayer money for money that we wouldn't have a use for an undefined period of time.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Thiessen?
No, I actually, you know what? I would just recommend that council don't approve this motion as it stands forward right now. It's just earmarked there that we know we're going to have to borrow if we need to borrow for road allowances or otherwise, and I think it would be, I don't know, it's going to come to us anyways, so we might as well at least have it in front of us rather than coming out of some shadow somewhere behind us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I would agree. I won't be supporting the motion. I think the intent here is to ensure that administration has the ability to manage those projects as they come up. We heard from the director that they come up from time to time and place to place, and that before administration goes and borrows any money, they need explicit council approval to do so. And so anything that's listed as general debenture should be, I think, taken by council and the community more as a statement of this is what is intended to be done. It doesn't actually have a cash impact now, and council would have full oversight and authority over approving that eventually anyhow. So I would encourage council not to support this motion. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this? If not, then I'll go to Councillor Clayton to close. Okay, then I will call for the vote. Please vote. I'm looking for one more. Thank you. Well, that motion does not carry. Okay. Councillor Bressie, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. I just wanted to point out to council, I'm happy to do whatever the will of council is, but there's an event coming up soon that might be important for council to be at tonight. I just wanted to point out. So if we want to continue, that's fine, but just want to point that out.
Yeah, we're actually getting really close to the list of things that council members just added and that we wanted to discuss. And so I think we can probably close that out. I think I have new snow dump site and patrol car as the last.
Patrol cars, so it'd just be one.
Okay, so new snow dump site, Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would move that council unfund the new snow dump marshalling yard for 2021 of $4 million. With that motion, I feel that in time between now and then, there are other opportunities that we can explore, and that $4 million is at this point hypothetical in sense. We haven't bid on land. We don't know what we're buying. Sure, we may not need to know the space, but we don't know market value of land at this point, and the $4 million is somewhat hypothetical. So therefore, I'd like to unfund it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Given. My understanding is that given our current snow removal programs and projections of how the city is going to grow, this is absolutely needed in the long term. That being said, as I said yesterday, I think that we should be reviewing our snow procedures, and this is actually a big reason of that. We do give a Cadillac service, as we talked about, when it comes to all kinds of snow, including how much we haul away. So I think we should be reviewing snow. I'm skeptical we need it either, but given the fact that the way we are currently doing snow and that we have no actual plans to review our snow removal, I think it should be left in the capital plan. So I'll be voting no, although I hope that's not in there when it actually gets time to do this.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. I'll also be voting no, really for the same reasons that I just reflected on the land purchase. I think this signals administration's intent to look at that. Ultimately, any decisions on acquiring land, council would have a vote on that. And decisions to fund a debenture, council would have a vote on that. And it isn't even in the 2020 year. So we could get to vote on all this over again next year anyways, just like we've done on a number of these different items. So at this stage, I don't really see the utility in amending something that council would A, have a bunch of other votes on to actually activate, and B, isn't even in the year that we're discussing. It's in a future year. So I won't support the motion. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I just wonder if I can get an idea of a snow storage facility the one on 92nd, but if it's similar in size to that, are we looking at a 10-acre piece of land, a 20-acre piece of land? What's the hope for a second site, or is this to have multiple, like a second, third, fourth site?
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. The area operationally that we've identified for this, we'd likely be looking to purchase a quarter section and carve off a portion of that and sell the remainder. So this would be the initial acquisition cost, and we'd expect to recoup some of the costs after we subdivided what we actually needed for the program and sold the rest. So it would be the second site.
So having said that, and I appreciate that answer, I will be supporting this motion. I can appreciate that it's next year's conversation, but I don't want to have the intent out there that we're going to look at buying quarter sections of land. We may only need 10 or 20 acres of it and competing with industry on getting into land sales and acquisitions. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Platt. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gibbon. I will not be supporting this motion, being someone who stays on the east side of the tracks and looks at the snow dump quite a bit. I can tell you that that mountain is getting very, very tall, and we're getting close to our capacity. I'd hate to borrow $14 million as it's in the plan for just a snow dump yard, but if we need to purchase the land and create the space and engineer and manufacture it, by all means, we might have to do that for community safety and for snow storage. This is also just an interesting thought, and I'm sure administration has already been on task with this, but this looks like something that we might be able to negotiate with within our ICF framework with the county, at least for land space and how we share those services. So. Snow removal is a big deal in the city, not so much in the county because we have ditches, but there's probably an area where they could help us out there and maybe a direction we can go, but I can't support it today for all the reasons that Councillor Bressie and Mayor Gibbon have already articulated.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I don't see anybody else in the queue. Councillor Clayton, do you wish to close? Yes. Okay, Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor Gibbon. As mentioned, identifying that we have $4 million to spend is going to set rates in the market. If we need this land, that is fair enough. We can get down that path, but to identify the amount that we're willing to spend is just showing our wallet open, and I don't think that that's a good initiative. So I encourage council to support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. I don't see anybody else. Sorry, that was our close. I will call for the vote. Please vote. I'm waiting for one more to register. Just make sure that when you punched your button that it stuck. Thank you. That motion does carry. I think that handles all of our items that council had added. Councillor Platt.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I just want to circle back to one of the ones that we first talked about with the downtown incentives programs, and similar to the other things that we've talked about in the past. If we have $230,000 sitting in this fund unallocated for 2019, I don't think we need to put another $250,000 in for 2020. So my motion is going to be that we fund this to $120,000 instead of $250,000. That would allow us to have over $350,000 to go into next year. So it would still enhance how much money's in the budget to be allocated. I just don't think we need to allocate money where it doesn't need to be allocated if we've got money sitting there already. Going back to the other things, if this is historical spending, I don't think it's in our community's best interest for us to be squirreling money away. And I think we can use that money in a better way.
So your motion is to reflect the 2020 budget under the, which I think administration did have on one of the slides as development incentive program, to reflect that amount as how much in 2020?
I guess what I'd like to see is a total amount for next year to be $350,000 instead of $250 with the carryover of the $230,000.
Make the motion on how much new money you want to add. The carryover happens as a course of business. We don't need to, like, that's happening all across the budget in a whole bunch of different areas.
For us to only fund $120,000 in 2020.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion to reduce the development incentives program, new funding from 250 to 120. Any discussion or debate on the motion? I will speak in opposition to the motion. I think that council has had some early concepts in discussion with industry and others about more significant incentives. I believe the cumulative nature of this is actually a strategy from administration to provide council that flexibility. And I think if we don't want that flexibility, then that's fine. Actually, I mean, we could discontinue the program, or we face and some future year when a council does want to do something, a really large chunk and a real challenge to support a financial incentive for development. I think that this accumulation approach is a worthwhile approach. And I also heard the director say that we would discuss the use and disposition of this funding in the coming months. So I would like to have that policy level discussion. And I would like to have some resources there so council has the flexibility that I think it's looking for in the future. Any other discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. Thank you. That motion does not carry. I think that handled all of the items that council members flagged for this point. There were some other items that council members had flagged, and we will see those tomorrow. That will conclude our business. So is there any other action that administration needs from us with respect to the additions and deletions? Okay, then we're concluded on capital. We would come back tomorrow to look at budget referrals and flagged items. And pardon me? Yeah, and any other items refer to budget and emergent issues. So we're concluded. We'll start up again tomorrow morning at 9. Thanks, everybody.